order paper? As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. We now come to the money resolution in respect of the powers of attorney bill. Minister to move the motion. The question is, as on the order paper. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order. Order.
What do we do now? Motions? Right, we've got two motions. I'll take them separately. Motion number 4, Minister to move.
I beg to move.
All in favour?
Aye.
The contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. We now come to number 5, telecommunications. Minister to move.
I beg to move.
Questions as on the order paper. As many that opinion say aye.
Aye.
The contrary, no. The ayes have it. I'll have to take that vote again. As many that opinion say aye. Aye. The contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Right. We now come to the statement. I call on the Prime Minister to move the statement. Rishi Sunak.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Before I begin, I know the whole House will join me in paying tribute to Betty Boothroyd, who passed away yesterday. She was a remarkable woman who commanded huge admiration and respect as the first female Speaker of this House. She was as firm as she was fair, and she presided over many historic moments in this House, among them the debates on the Belfast Good Friday Agreement. Her passion, wit and immeasurable contribution to our democracy will never be forgotten. And Mr Speaker, let us also send our very best wishes to Detective Chief Inspector John Caldwell and his family. He is a man of immense courage who both on and off duty has devoted himself to the service of others. This House stands united with the people and leaders of all communities across Northern Ireland in condemning those who are trying to drag us back to the past. They will never succeed. With permission, Mr Speaker, I'd like to make a statement on the Northern Ireland Protocol. After weeks of negotiations today, we have made a decisive breakthrough. The Windsor Framework delivers free-flowing trade within the whole United Kingdom. It protects Northern Ireland's place in our union, and it safeguards sovereignty for the people of Northern Ireland. By achieving all this, it preserves the delicate balance inherent in the Belfast Good Friday Agreement. And Mr Speaker, it does what many said could not be done, removing thousands of pages of EU laws and making permanent, legally binding changes to the Protocol Treaty itself. That is the breakthrough we have made. Those are the changes we will deliver, and now is the time to move forward as one United Kingdom. Mr Speaker, before I turn to the details, let us remind ourselves why this matters. It matters because at the heart of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement, and the reason it's endured for a quarter of a century, is equal respect for the aspirations and identities of all communities and all its 3 strands. But the Northern Ireland Protocol has undermined that balance. How can we say the Protocol protects the Belfast Good Friday Agreement when it has caused the institutions of that agreement to collapse? So in line with our legal responsibilities, we are acting today to preserve the balance of that agreement and chart a new way forward for Northern Ireland. I pay tribute to our European friends for recognising the need for change, particularly President von der Leyen, my predecessors for laying the groundwork for today's agreement, and my right honourable friends, the Foreign and Northern Ireland Secretaries, for their perseverance in finally persuading the EU to do what it spent years refusing to do, to rewrite the treaty and replace it with a radical, legally binding new framework. Today's agreement has three equally important objectives. First, allowing trade to flow freely within our UK internal market. Second, protecting Northern Ireland's place in our union. And third, safeguarding sovereignty and closing the democratic deficit. Let me take each in turn. Mr. Speaker, core to the problems with the protocol was that it treated goods moving from Great Britain to Northern Ireland as if they were crossing an international customs border. This created extra costs and paperwork for businesses who had to fill out complex customs declarations. It limited choice for the people of Northern Ireland, and it undermined the UK internal market, a matter of identity as well as economics. Today's agreement removes any sense of a border in the Irish Sea and ensures the free flow of trade within the UK. We have secured a key negotiating objective, the introduction of a new green lane for goods destined for Northern Ireland, with a separate red lane for those going to the EU. Within the green lane, burdensome customs bureaucracy will be scrapped and replaced with data sharing of ordinary existing commercial information. Routine checks and tests will also be scrapped. The only checks will be those required to stop smugglers and criminals. And our new green lane will be open to a broad, comprehensive range of businesses across the United Kingdom. I'm pleased to say we have also permanently protected tariff-free movement of all types of steel into Northern Ireland. And for goods going the other way, from Northern Ireland to Great Britain, we have scrapped export declarations, delivering finally completely unfettered trade. And Mr. Speaker, the commitment to establish the green lane is achieved by a legally binding amendment to the text of the treaty itself. This is fundamental, far-reaching change, and it permanently removes the border in the Irish Sea. Mr. Speaker, perhaps the single most important area of trade between Great Britain and Northern Ireland is food. 3/4 of the food in Northern Ireland's supermarkets comes from the rest of the UK. Yet the protocol applied the same burdens on shipments from Cairnryan to Larne as between Holyhead and Dublin. If it was implemented in full, we would see supermarket lorries needing hundreds of certificates for every individual item, every single document checked, supermarket staples like sausages banned altogether, more delays, more cost, less choice. So today's agreement fixes all this with a new, permanent, legally abiding approach to food. We will expand the green lane to food retailers, and not just supermarkets, but wholesalers and hospitality too. Instead of hundreds of certificates, lorries will make one simple, digital declaration to confirm that goods will remain in Northern Ireland. Visual inspections will be cut from 100% now to just 5%. Physical checks and tests will be scrapped unless we suspect fraud, smuggling or disease. And so there will be no need for vets in warehouses. Of course, to deliver this, we need to reassure the EU that food imports won't be taken into Ireland. So we will ask retailers to mark a small number of particularly high-risk food products as not for EU, with a phased rollout of this requirement to give them the time to adjust. And more fundamentally, we have delivered a form of dual regulation for food, the single biggest sector by far for East-West trade and one of the most important in people's lives. Under the protocol, retail food products made to UK standards could not be sold in Northern Ireland. Today's agreement completely changes that. This means the ban on British products like sausages entering Northern Ireland has now been scrapped. If it's available on supermarket shelves in Great Britain, then it will be available in supermarket shelves in Northern Ireland. We will still need to make sure that goods moved into Northern Ireland don't risk bringing in animal and plant diseases, but that's clearly a common sense measure, never opposed by anyone, to prevent diseases circulating within the long-standing single epidemiological zone on the island of Ireland. And, Mr Speaker, that brings me to the treatment of parcels. If the protocol was fully implemented, every single parcel travelling between Great Britain and Northern Ireland will be subject to full international customs. You'd have needed a long, complex form to send every single parcel, even a birthday present, for a niece or nephew. And you could have only shopped online from retailers willing to deal with all that bureaucracy, with some already pulling out of Northern Ireland. Today's agreement fixes all of this. It achieves something we've never achieved before, removing requirements of the EU Customs Code for people sending and receiving parcels. Families can rightly send packages to each other without filling in forms. Online retailers can serve customers in Northern Ireland as they did before, and businesses can ship parcels through the Green Lane, all underpinned by data sharing by parcel operators with a phased rollout and time for them to adjust. So, Mr Speaker, no burdensome customs bureaucracy, no routine checks, bans on food products scrapped, steel tariff rate quotas fixed, tariff reimbursement scheme approved, vet inspections gone, export declarations gone, parcels paperwork gone. We have delivered what the people of Northern Ireland asked for and the command paper promised. We have removed the border in the Irish Sea. But, Mr Speaker, to preserve the balance of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement, we also need to protect Northern Ireland's place in our union. The Windsor Framework is about making sure that Northern Ireland gets the full benefit of being part of the United Kingdom in every respect. Under the protocol, in too many ways, that simply wasn't the case. Take tax. When I was Chancellor, it frustrated me that when I cut VAT on solar panels or beer duty in pubs, those tax cuts didn't apply in Northern Ireland. Now we've amended the legal text of the treaty so that critical VAT and excise changes will apply to the whole of the United Kingdom. This means zero rates of VAT on energy-saving materials will now apply in Northern Ireland. Reforms to alcohol duty to cut the cost of a pint in pubs will now apply in Northern Ireland. But because we now have control over VAT policy, we can make sure that the EU's plan to reduce the VAT threshold by £10,000 will not apply in Northern Ireland, and nor will the SME VAT directive that would have brought huge amounts of EU red tape for small businesses. We're also making subsidy control provisions work as intended. Already, just 2% of subsidy measures in Northern Ireland fall within the scope of the EU approvals under the protocol. Nevertheless, today's agreement goes further, addressing the so-called reach-back of EU state aid law. It does this by imposing stringent new tests. For the EU to argue we're in breach of their rules, they'd now have to demonstrate that there is a real, genuine and material impact on Northern Ireland's trade with the EU. That is a much higher threshold than the protocol, limiting disputes to what the 2021 command paper called subsidies on a significant scale relating directly to Northern Ireland. We've also protected the special status of agriculture and fisheries subsidies in Northern Ireland, which will be completely outside the EU's common agricultural policy. All of which means the problem of reach-back is fixed. As well as tax and spend, the UK government has a responsibility to protect the supply of medicines to all its citizens. Our ability to do that was constrained by the protocol. The biggest problem is that drugs approved for use by the UK's medicines regulator are not automatically available in Northern Ireland. Imagine someone suffering with cancer in Belfast, seeing a potentially life-changing new drug available everywhere else in the UK, but unable to access it at home. And when the current grace period ends in 2024, the situation will get worse still. Expensive and burdensome checks on all medicines, Companies having to manufacture drugs with two completely different labels and supply chains. Pharmacies needing to check every package with complex scanners. And when 80% of Northern Ireland's medicines come from Great Britain, those frictions pose a serious risk to the supply of medicines to the people of Northern Ireland. To fix this, today's agreement achieves something unprecedented. It provides dual regulation for medicines. The UK's regulator will approve all drugs for the whole UK market, including Northern Ireland, with no role for the European Medicines Agency. This fully protects the supply of medicines from Great Britain into Northern Ireland and once again asserts the primacy of UK regulation. The same medicines, in the same packs, with the same labels, will be available in every pharmacy and hospital in the United Kingdom. And crucially, dual regulation means that Northern Ireland's world-leading healthcare industry, which brings much-needed jobs and investment, can still trade with both the EU and UK markets. This is a landmark deal for patients in Northern Ireland. It is a permanent solution that brings peace of mind. And Mr. Speaker, the protocol also banned quintessentially British products going to Northern Ireland. When people wanted to import oak trees to mark Her late Majesty's Platinum Jubilee, the protocol stood in their way. It suspended the historic trade in seed potatoes between Scotland and Northern Ireland. And if implemented, it would create massive costs and bureaucracies for people travelling around the UK with their pets, disrupting family life and our family of nations. That's why today's agreement will lift the ban on shrubs, plants and trees going to Northern Ireland. Lift the ban on the movement of seed potatoes, particularly important for Scottish businesses, and we will deliver this by expanding the existing UK plant passport scheme. And when it comes to pets, we have made sure that people from Northern Ireland will have completely free access to travel to Great Britain. And if you're a pet owner travelling from Great Britain to Northern Ireland, just make sure your pet is microchipped, and then all you'll need to do is simply tick a box when booking your travel. So whether it's lower VAT rates, lower beer duty, Jubilee Oaks in garden centres, seamless travel with pets, seamless trade in seed potatoes, or the seamless supply of cutting-edge medicines, all of this now available for everyone, everywhere in the United Kingdom. And Mr. Speaker, the Windsor Framework goes further still, safeguarding sovereignty for the people of Northern Ireland and eliminating the democratic deficit. Fundamentally, the protocol meant the EU could impose new laws on the people of Northern Ireland without them having a say. I know some members of this House, whose voices I deeply respect, say that EU laws should have no role whatsoever in Northern Ireland. I understand that view. I am sympathetic to it. But for as long as the people of Northern Ireland continue to support their businesses having privileged access to the EU market, and if we want to avoid a hard border between Northern Ireland and Ireland, as we all do, then there will be some role for EU law. So the question is, what is the absolute minimum amount necessary to avoid a hard border? Today's agreement scraps 1,700 pages of EU law. The amount of EU law that applies in Northern Ireland is less than 3%. And the people of Northern Ireland retain the right to reject that 3% through next year's consent vote. However, that consent vote is about the whole protocol, so it cannot by its nature provide oversight of individual new laws. And it does not address the number one challenge to sovereignty made by the protocol, the ability of the EU to impose new or amended goods laws on Northern Ireland without them having a say. To address that, today's agreement introduces a new Stormont break. The Stormont break does more than just give Northern Ireland a say over new EU laws. It means they can block them. How will this work? The democratically elected Assembly can oppose new EU goods rules that would have significant and lasting effects on their everyday lives. They will do so on the same basis as the petition of concern mechanism in the Good Friday Agreement, needing the support of 30 members from at least 2 parties. If that happens, the UK government will have a veto. And we will work with the Northern Ireland Assembly and all parties to codify how the UK government will use that veto. And let me tell the House the full significance of this breakthrough. The Stormont break gives the institutions of the Good Friday Agreement a powerful new safeguard. It means the United Kingdom can veto new EU laws if they are not supported by both communities in Northern Ireland. And yes, it is true that until now, the EU had refused to consider treaty change. We were told it was impossible. The EU negotiators would never consider it. But the Stormont break has been introduced by fundamentally rewriting the treaty, specifically the provisions relating to dynamic alignment. That is a permanent change. It ends the automatic ratchet of EU law. And if the veto is used, the European courts can never overturn our decision. And the EU have also explicitly accepted an important principle in the political declaration. It is there in black and white that the treaty is subject to the Vienna Convention. This means that unequivocally the legal basis for the Windsor Framework is in international law. I'd like to thank my right honourable friend, the member for Stone, for his support in negotiating this point. And it puts beyond all doubt that we have now taken back control. Mr. Speaker, from the very start, we have listened closely and carefully to views on all sides of this debate. I'm grateful to many members of this House, the communities of Northern Ireland, and the voices of business and civil society for putting forward their suggestions. I want to particularly thank the Northern Ireland business groups that I have spoken to. I hope in today's agreement they recognise we have addressed their concerns. We are delivering stability, certainty, simplicity, affordability and clarity, as well as strengthened representation for the businesses of Northern Ireland. I also want to speak directly to the unionist community. I understand and have listened to your frustrations and concerns. And I would not be standing here today if I did not believe today's agreement marks a turning point for the people of Northern Ireland. It is clearly in the interests of the people and those of us who are passionate about the cause of unionism for power sharing to return. Of course, parties will want to consider the agreement in detail, a process that will need time and care. And there are, of course, many voices and perspectives within Northern Ireland, and it is a job of government to respect them all. But I have kept the concerns raised by the elected representatives of unionism at the forefront of my mind, because it is their concerns with the protocol that have been so pronounced. And what I can say is this: our goal has been to ensure the economic rights of the people of Northern Ireland under the Act of Union and Belfast Good Friday Agreement, placing them on an equal footing with the rest of the UK with respect to tax, trade and the availability of goods. And we have worked to end the prospect of trade diversion, removed any sense of a border for UK internal trade, removed routine customs or checks for goods destined for Northern Ireland, removed thousands of pages of existing EU law and introduced a UK veto on dynamic alignment through the Stormont break. We have created a form of dual regulation where it works and it is needed most in sectors like medicines and food retail. We have delivered unfettered access to the whole UK market for Northern Ireland's businesses, and we will take further steps to avoid regulatory divergence in future. We've secured a clear EU commitment and process to manage future changes with a special goods body, and all of this means Northern Ireland's businesses have continued access to the EU market as they requested. It means we have protected the letter and the spirit of Northern Ireland's constitutional guarantee in the Belfast Agreement, with the Stormont break creating an effective cross-community safeguard. There are, Mr Speaker, two distinct economies on the island of Ireland, and that will remain the case. Today's agreement puts beyond all doubt that Northern Ireland's place in the internal market and United Kingdom is fully restored. Mr Speaker, I want to conclude by directly addressing the question of the Northern Ireland Protocol Bill. As I and my predecessors always said, the bill was only ever meant to be a last resort, meant for a world where we could not get negotiations going. As the government said at the time of introduction, our clear preference remains a negotiated solution. Now that we've persuaded the EU to fundamentally rewrite the treaty text of the protocol, we have a new and better option. The Windsor Framework delivers a decisively better outcome than the bill, achieving what people said could not be done and what the bill does not offer. It permanently removes any sense of a border in the Irish Sea. It gives us control over dynamic alignment through the Stormont break beyond what the bill promised, and the bill did not change a thing in international law, keeping the jurisdiction of the ECJ and leaving us open to months, maybe years of uncertainty, disruption and legal challenge. Today's agreement makes binding legal changes to the treaty itself and is explicitly based in international law. And unlike the bill, it is an agreement that provides certainty, stability and, crucially, can start delivering benefits almost immediately for the people and businesses of Northern Ireland. Of course, the House would expect to be informed of the government's updated legal position on whether there is a lawful basis to proceed with the bill, so I'm publishing it today. It says that because we have achieved a new negotiated agreement which preserves the balance of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement, the original and sound justification legally for the bill has now fallen away. In other words, neither do we need the bill, and nor do we have a credible basis to pursue it. As such, we will no longer proceed with the bill, and the European Union will no longer proceed with their legal actions against the UK. Instead, we will pursue the certainty of a new way forward with the Windsor Framework. And let me just remind the House of the full breadth and significance of what we have achieved today. We've achieved free-flowing trade with a green lane for goods, no burdensome customs bureaucracy, no routine checks on trade, no paperwork whatsoever for Northern Irish goods moving into Great Britain, and no border in the Irish Sea. We've protected Northern Ireland's place in the Union, with state aid reach-back fixed, the same tax rules applying everywhere, vet certificates for food lorries gone, the ban on British sausages gone, parcel paperwork gone, pet paperwork gone, garden centres now selling the same trees, supermarkets selling the same food, and pharmacies selling the same medicines. And we've safeguarded sovereignty for the people of Northern Ireland. With the democratic deficit closed, the Vienna Convention confirmed, thousands of pages of EU law scrapped, and with the Stormont break, we have safeguarded democracy and sovereignty for the people of Northern Ireland. So that is the choice before us, Mr. Speaker. Let us seize the opportunity of this moment, the certainty of an agreement that fixes the problems we face, commands broad support and consensus, and offers us at last the freedom to move forward together. That is what the people of Northern Ireland deserve. That is what the Windsor Framework delivers. As a Conservative, a Brexiteer and a Unionist, I believe passionately, with my head and my heart, that this is the right way forward. Right for Northern Ireland, right for our United Kingdom, and I commend it to this House.
Thank you. What I want to do is make sure we get everybody in. This is a very important day. I now call the Leader of the Opposition, Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to the Prime Minister for advance sight of his statement and for the briefing I was given earlier this afternoon. I'd like to start by joining the Prime Minister in paying tribute to Betty Boothroyd. As Speaker of this House, She was at the forefront of a generation that smashed the glass ceiling for female politicians. She was an inspirational woman, a dedicated and devoted public servant who will be clearly missed by all who knew her. My thoughts, the thoughts of the whole House, are with her very many friends and family. Mr Speaker, the Good Friday Agreement and the peace and prosperity it brought to Northern Ireland are amongst the proudest achievements of the last Labour government. But we in Labour have always recognised this achievement does not principally belong to us, but to the people of Northern Ireland, who over a quarter of a century have overcome differences that once seemed insurmountable and shown that they can work together to build a better future for themselves and for the generations to come. I had the privilege of working for a number of years with the Police Service of Northern Ireland so that it can serve and represent both communities. But it's the police officers themselves who carried out that change. They helped make peace of the Good Friday Agreement stick. So I was deeply saddened by the shooting of DCI John Caldwell. And our thoughts, the thoughts of the whole House, are with him, his family, and with his colleagues. But, Mr Speaker, DCI Caldwell's shooting is a reminder that we must continue to strive for peace, that we in the House must take our obligations under the Good Friday Agreement and to the people of Northern Ireland as seriously as they do. It is in that spirit that I have been clear for some time that if the Prime Minister were to get an agreement with the EU, and if their agreement is in the interests of this country and Northern Ireland, then Labour would support it. And we will stick to our word. We will not snipe. We will not seek to play political games. And when the Prime Minister puts this deal forward for a vote, Labour will support it and vote for it. The protocol will never be perfect. It's a compromise. But I've always been clear that if implemented correctly, it is an agreement that can work in the spirit of the Good Friday Agreement. And now that it has been agreed, we all have an obligation to make it work. The moral core of the Good Friday Agreement is simple. All people of Northern Ireland have the right to identify themselves and be accepted as Irish or British or both, and freely participating in the economic life of the UK or the Republic of Ireland is an essential part of that. That is why it is good that the deal before us will see fewer unnecessary checks on goods moving between Great Britain and Northern Ireland. The Red and Green Lane proposal is a good one. It will make life easier for business. It will enable the people of Northern Ireland to participate more freely in the economic life of the UK. It has our full support. The protocol will continue to ensure there's no physical border on the island of Ireland. That is essential. We all know that any physical border would be a source of tension, a physical manifestation of new barriers between communities in Northern Ireland and the economic life in the Republic. This agreement will allow us to move forward as a country rather than be locked in endless disputes with our allies. It will improve our diplomatic standing, which has been damaged by the government's previous threats to break international law. And I am encouraged that the DUP has said it will look carefully at the measures that it contains. But we must be honest, this comes with trade-offs. The Right Honourable Member for Uxbridge and South Ruislip told the people of Northern Ireland that his protocol meant no forms, no checks, no barriers of any kind on goods crossing the Irish Sea after Brexit. That was absolute nonsense. A point-blank refusal to engage with unionists in Northern Ireland in good faith, never mind take their concerns seriously. And it inevitably contributed to the collapse of power sharing in Northern Ireland. And I have to say, as the Prime Minister listed all the problems with the protocol, I did rather wonder whether he'd forgotten who negotiated it. So when presenting what this agreement means in practice, and it will take time for everybody to read it and carefully consider it, I urge the Prime Minister to be utterly unlike his predecessor. Do not pretend the deal is something it is not. Where there are trade-offs to be made, argue the case for them. Treat unionists with the respect of frank honesty, not the contempt of bluster. Because in this 25th anniversary year of the Good Friday Agreement, we must once again embrace compromise and put division behind us. This deal is not perfect, but because we recognise that the UK agreed to the protocol and has an obligation to make it work, because we recognise that for the protocol to work, there will inevitably be trade-offs, and because we always recognise that peace and prosperity in Northern Ireland is hard won, Labour will support the Windsor Framework. I hope that in coming days others will come to support the agreement in the same spirit and join Labour in voting to make the protocol work, in voting to face the future, in voting for country before party. Thank you, Mr Speaker.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Can I thank the right honourable gentleman for his comments and support. I agree with him on the substance of what he has said, and I would just say to him that at this moment in time, the right thing for all of us to do is not to look backwards, but to look forwards to the brighter future that we can see for Northern Ireland. He talks of trade-off, and for me, I would talk of balance, and the delicate balance inherent in the Belfast Good Friday Agreement. And it's important that we respect the aspirations and identities of all communities. And that's what the protocol had unbalanced, and that's what the Windsor Framework restores. And I do believe, hand on heart, that the changes we have achieved, the framework that we now have in place, will enable balance to be restored to the people of Northern Ireland. It puts them in control of their destiny. It secures their place in the Union. It safeguards their sovereignty. And on that basis, I hope we can look forward to a brighter future for everyone in Northern Ireland.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. May I first associate myself with the remarks made both by my right honourable friend and the Leader of the Opposition about Baroness Boothroyd, an outstanding speaker, and DCI John Caldwell. The Northern Ireland Protocol, negotiated and signed by the Government in December 2019, adopted the European Union's preferred proposal of a border down the Irish Sea. Can I congratulate my right honourable friend and the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland and the Foreign Secretary and all their teams for all the work they have done to achieve this negotiated settlement, which will make a huge difference. And does my right honourable friend agree with me that the best move now is for everybody across this House to support this settlement, because that is what is in the best interests of all the people of Northern Ireland?
Prime Minister.
Well, can I thank my right honourable friend and join her in paying tribute to the Northern Ireland Foreign Secretaries. They deserve enormous credit for the framework that we have achieved today. And can I pay tribute to her for all her work over the years on this topic, where she has kept safeguarding the Union at the top of her mind throughout. And I agree with her. What all of us should have at this moment at the top of our minds is the people of Northern Ireland and what is in their interest. And I hope when people have the time and space to consider the Windsor Framework that they will see that this is the best way to move forward and build that better future in Northern Ireland.
SNP spokesperson Stephen Flynn.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I think I'm the group leader, but I'll take spokesperson as well. The glass ceilings are there to be broken. Betty Boothroyd didn't just break a glass ceiling, she shattered the glass ceiling, and in that regard she has my utmost respect, and my thoughts and condolences are with her and all of her family members. My thoughts are also with the police officer in Northern Ireland who was so tragically and appallingly shot in recent days. I sincerely hope that he is able to make a recovery, and I join with members across the House in that regard. Mr Speaker, to the agreement today, you'd be forgiven for thinking on the basis of what the Prime Minister has said, and in the Chamber, and indeed earlier today, that it had absolutely nothing to do with him, that all those problems were nothing to do with the Conservative Party or indeed him as a government minister. So what happened a couple of years ago? Were they simply being opportunistic when they put this in place? Were they incompetent when they put this in place? Or were they simply duped into believing that something was oven ready when quite clearly it was not? I have no doubt that the public will draw their own conclusions in that regard. But broadly speaking, Mr Speaker, broadly speaking, I'm fully supportive of the agreement. And I'm fully supportive of the agreement for three simple reasons. Three simple and interwoven reasons. It seeks to safeguard peace in Northern Ireland, something which we all know is incredibly important. It seeks to protect the Good Friday Agreement, which is, of course, protect the Good Friday Agreement, which I think everyone in the Chamber would agree is incredibly important. And of course, because it seeks to provide a pathway back to the democratic institutions in Northern Ireland being able to sit. Now, it's not for me to pontificate about democracy in Northern Ireland, but I sincerely hope that those parties involved will be able to come to an agreeable conclusion, and I know the Prime Minister shares my views in that regard. But, Mr Speaker, whilst all of that is good, we cannot and we should not forget the damage which has been done by leaving the European Union. Brexit has been an unmitigated disaster, and they don't have to believe me, Mr Speaker, because what they should do is read the OBR, who outlined that there would be a 4% hit to GDP as a result of Brexit. Or perhaps they should reflect upon the fact that the trade deficit between the UK and EU is at its highest level on record. Perhaps they could listen to the private sector, those businesses who are unable to trade, those businesses who are unable to get the workforce that they require, those businesses who are unable to get the goods that they need. Or perhaps they could listen to the public sector, who of course are facing severe problems as well, many of them driven by workforce shortages. Indeed, many of the problems which encompass and face all of our NHSs across these Isles come from the fact that we have significant staff shortages in social care. Each and every one of those points, Mr Speaker, is a result of the disaster that has been leaving the European Union. And I just find it astonishing, Mr Speaker, that we have a situation where the leader of the Labour Party and the leader of the Conservative Party are hand in glove when it comes to their position on Brexit. But just finally, Mr Speaker, we heard integrity of the United Kingdom spoken about at length by the Prime Minister. Indeed, I think it was reflected upon by the leader of the opposition as well. But whilst there may be a scintilla of truth within that argument, what this deal does not do is create parity for the nations of these isles. Because what it allows, and I see the Northern Ireland Minister sitting there who was very positive about this in an interview earlier on, it means that businesses in Northern Ireland have access to the single market, whereas businesses in Scotland do not. Now, I do not begrudge that to the people and businesses of Northern Ireland, but I do regret that Scotland does not have those same opportunities. So on that point, can the Prime Minister just clarify why Scotland is at a significant disadvantage in that regard on his watch? And does he not agree with me that the only way for Scotland to have access to the single market, the only way for Scotland to have access to the customs union, the only way for Scotland to rejoin the European Union is to rid itself of Westminster?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, can I thank the honourable gentleman for his support for the new agreement that we struck today, the Windsor Framework, in particular his acknowledgement of the sovereignty that it provides for the people of Northern Ireland to have a say in their own destiny, something that was asked for and something that has been delivered. He's also right to say that it's not for us, any of us, to opine, and we will give the parties and the communities in Northern Ireland the space and the time they need to consider the detail of the Windsor Framework. And more broadly, Mr. Speaker, without engaging on the broader debate that he raises, I am a passionate unionist, and I will always believe that our union is stronger when we are together, and Scotland will always, alongside Northern Ireland, Wales, be part of what makes this country great, and we will fight. We will fight day in and day out to protect that union.
And the House of Peter Bottomley.
Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition helpfully said that people in Northern Ireland might regard themselves as Irish or as British and Irish. I think a large number will also regard themselves just as Northern Irish. I think that from the beginning to the end of this framework, the beginning which says the protocol has been the source of acute political, economic and societal difficulties, to the last sentence which talks about the shared desire for a positive relationship, constituents will say this agreement resolves some of the known problems about the protocol and some of the ones which have become obvious since then. It's over 50 years, or about 50 years, since there was last a unionist MP who was a minister in the UK government. I hope this agreement makes it possible that that can happen again.
Well, can I thank the Father of House for his support and his observations. He's right about the agreement that we struck. It resolves the problems that we know about, but it also puts in place structures and mechanisms to resolve anything else that might come down the line, because it's important that there is dialogue, not just with the European Union, but close dialogue with communities and businesses in Northern Ireland, something they have asked for. And as a result of this agreement, they will have new engagement, new ways to make their voices heard, so that we can continue to make sure that we do the best for them and their communities in Northern Ireland.
Sir Geoffrey Donaldson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And could I, on behalf of the Democratic Unionist Party, add our voice in tribute to the late Betty Boothroyd, who was my first Speaker, a wonderful woman who brought so much to this House. And could I also add our concern and our sympathy to the family of DCI Caldwell, where he continues to be in our prayers, Mr. Speaker. And I was pleased to stand with the other leaders in Belfast with the Chief Constable on Friday, and to be clear, the people who perpetrated this evil have no place in the future of Northern Ireland. Mr. Speaker, our judgment and principled position in opposing the protocol in Parliament and at Stormont, I believe, has been vindicated. Undoubtedly, it is now recognised that the protocol does not work. And when others said there could be no renegotiation and no change, it was our determination that has proven what can be achieved. And I would like to thank the Prime Minister and his predecessors for their work and engagement to date on this issue. In broad terms, it is clear that significant progress has been secured across a number of areas, whilst also recognising that there remain key issues of concern. There can be no disguising the fact, for example, that in some sectors of our economy in Northern Ireland, EU law remains applicable in our part of the United Kingdom. My party will want to study the detail of what has been published today, as well as examining the legal text, the political declaration and the government's command paper. Where necessary, we stand ready to engage with the government in order to seek further clarification, reworking or change as required. Ultimately, my party will now assess all these proposed outcomes and arrangements against our 7 tests outlined in our 2022 Assembly Election Manifesto, to determine whether what has been published meets those tests and whether it respects and restores Northern Ireland's place within the United Kingdom. And in this regard, and finally, Mr. Speaker, I agree with the Prime Minister that the issue of sovereignty is crucial. Article 6 of the Act of Union, the very basis of the Union itself, the economic union of the United Kingdom, was seriously undermined by the Northern Ireland Protocol and its implementation. And that needs to be resolved. Of the £77 billion of goods manufactured in Northern Ireland, £65 billion of that £77 billion are sold within the United Kingdom. The overwhelming majority of what we produce, we sell within our own internal market. And I want an assurance from the Prime Minister that not just now, but in the future, the Government of the United Kingdom will protect Northern Ireland's place within that internal market and will not allow the application of EU law to put barriers in the way of our ability to trade with the rest of our own country.
Mr Speaker, can I first of all start by thanking the Right Honourable Friend for the constructive engagement that I've had with him and members of his team over recent time. As I said earlier, I've tried very hard to listen in particular to the concerns of the elected representatives of the Unionist community in Northern Ireland, because I know it is them who have had the most concerns with the protocol. And at the forefront of my mind throughout all our negotiations has been resolving the issues that those communities have raised with me and the government that they are grappling with. I believe very strongly that the Windsor Framework does resolve those issues, but I appreciate that the Right Honourable Gentleman and his party and other Unionist communities will want to take the time to consider the detail, and I respect that, and we will give them the time and the space to consider that and stand ready to answer any questions and provide any clarifications. But I also can tell him, with regard to the objectives that he set out and others have set out, that I believe that this agreement, this Windsor Framework, does ensure the free flow of trade within our United Kingdom internal market, including unfettered access for Northern Ireland producers to the rest of the United Kingdom. I do believe it secures Northern Ireland's place in the Union, making sure that citizens and businesses can benefit in the same way everywhere across the United Kingdom. And lastly, and as he has rightly highlighted to me on previous occasions, it ensures and safeguards sovereignty for the people of Northern Ireland so that they are in control of their destiny. I believe that what we have achieved today does provide the basis for parties in Northern Ireland to consider the detail and hopefully move forward so together we can build a better future for Northern Ireland, and I look forward to doing that with him.
Chair of the Select Committee, Simon Hall.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr Speaker. My Right Honourable Friend the Prime Minister and his ministerial colleagues have strained every sinew these last weeks and months to arrive at today's position. They are to be congratulated, and Mr Speaker, it demonstrates that when committed minds do politics seriously, serious and beneficial outcomes can be delivered for the benefit of all in our country. Whilst respecting entirely and agreeing with my Right Honourable Friend that parties, particularly those in Northern Ireland, need the time and space to study the detail and to work out all of the implications for those in Northern Ireland, Northern Irish business wants, and the good people of Northern Ireland most certainly deserve, quick certainty. So if there are to be votes in this place on any element of the Windsor Framework as announced today, can my Right Honourable Friend commit to ensuring that those votes take place speedily in order to ensure that certainty and peace of mind for all who either live in Northern Ireland or who wish Northern Ireland well?
Prime Minister.
Can I thank my honourable friend and the chair of the Select Committee? It's a subject that he knows well and is passionate about rightly, and I thank him for all the work he and his colleagues have done over the years, which has been valuable as we have considered and concluded these negotiations. As I said earlier today, Parliament will of course have its say and there will be a vote, but we will need to do that at the appropriate time as we give people the time and space to consider the detail. But he makes an important point, and a benefit of this framework, this agreement, is that it can start providing that certainty and those benefits to the people and communities of Northern Ireland very soon. And that's why we have concluded these negotiations, and we want to start delivering those benefits for people on the ground as quickly as we can.
And David.
Can I join others in paying tribute to our late great Speaker, Betty Boothroyd? Mr Speaker, like me, I'm sure you remember with fondness when you caught Speaker Boothroyd's eye and when she brought you to order. Can I also send our thoughts and prayers to DCI John Cordwell and his family and thank him for his courage and bravery. Mr Speaker, like others, the Liberal Democrats will now closely study this deal. But can I welcome the spirit of partnership and compromise between the UK Government and the European Union in the formation of the Windsor Agreement? Can I ask the Prime Minister what consultation he will now undertake with all Northern Ireland's political parties, including the Alliance Party, on the Stormont break? Can you reassure us that the operation of the Stormont break will not undermine the economic stability and certainty or the political stability so desperately needed in Northern Ireland?
Thank you. I'm happy to give the right honourable gentleman the assurance that we will continue, as we have done, to engage with all parties and communities in Northern Ireland. That is the right way to proceed, particularly with regard to the operation of the break that's set out in the command paper, that we look forward to discussing that and how to codify that with the Executive, the Assembly and political parties as we move forward. That's something that we're very happy to do. And just so the honourable gentleman is clear, the Stormont break is based on an existing Good Friday Agreement mechanism, the petition of concern mechanism. It's well established in Northern Ireland as a cross-community safeguard. That's why we have chosen it as the appropriate mechanism for this particular purpose. But as I said, we will continue to engage with all parties to make sure that we get it absolutely right and how it works.
Julian Smith.
Speaker, can I join tributes to can I join tributes to John Caldwell, who was shot whilst loading footballs into his car, having trained kids at a football match in Omagh last week in front of his son. I welcome the Windsor Agreement and Windsor Framework and believe that today marks a critical moment in ending 3 years of instability across Northern Ireland. This has affected communities throughout this most fragile part of our country. I pay tribute to my right honourable friend and the team for all that they have done to secure this. Would you agree that we now need to give my right honourable friend, member for Lagan Valley, all the other Northern Ireland parties time and space and encouragement to restore power sharing and to ensure that political decision-making in Northern Ireland can start as soon as possible?
Prime Minister.
Can I pay tribute to my right honourable friend, my neighbour, not just for the job he did as Northern Ireland Secretary of State, but for his continued passion and devotion to the people of Northern Ireland? And can I also thank him personally for the support and advice he has given me in helping us reach the framework today? I wholeheartedly agree with him, and I hope that we can move forward with time and space to build a better future for the people of Northern Ireland. I know that that's what he wants to see. I join him in wanting to see that, and we stand ready to work with everyone to bring about that outcome.
Hilary Benn.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr Speaker. Can I congratulate the negotiators on this very significant achievement? Can I also congratulate the Prime Minister on his statement in which he was so frank about the manifest failings of the original Northern Ireland Protocol, negotiated and signed by his predecessor, which made today's deal so necessary. Does he agree with me that the European Union has moved a long way in these negotiations? And does he agree that all of us in this House look forward as soon as possible to the restoration of power sharing in Northern Ireland, because that is in the best interests of the people of that part of our United Kingdom?
Minister.
Well, I thank the right honourable gentleman, and he's right. We have had constructive and good negotiations with the European Union, and I pay tribute to the President Ursula von der Leyen for the leadership and vision that she has demonstrated in trying to find a way through to help us resolve these issues. She and her team deserve enormous credit for displaying that vision, leadership and creativity, and I wholeheartedly agree with him that the people of Northern Ireland need and deserve their institutions to be up and running. I think that's something all of us in this House agree on, and all of us want to see that happen as soon as practically possible.
David Davis.
Can I start by unreservedly congratulating my right honourable friend on what seems to be a spectacular negotiating success. In the Windsor Framework, the Prime Minister has succeeded in delivering a deal which eliminates the issues of the Irish Sea border, deals with practical issues in Northern Ireland, from food to pets to plants to parcels, from medicine regulation to tax rules. But above all, has introduced the extraordinary mechanism of the Stormont break. I'm unaware of any mechanism in any international agreement like the Stormont break. It seems to me a brilliant piece of negotiating insight and imagination. Could he explain to the House, because we won't all know in detail, can he explain to the House exactly how this mechanism will work and what its limitations will be?
Prime Minister.
Well, can I thank my right honourable friend for his warm words, but also tell him it means a lot, as this is something that I know as a Brexiteer of long-standing credentials and as someone who has done the job. He knows how difficult these things are, and to have his support means a lot to me and the government, and I thank him for it. The break will work, as I said, on the basis of the petition and concern mechanism, which is a Good Friday Agreement institutional framework, which is why we believe it is the right cross-community safeguard to use. It will be applied to those good rules in Annex 2 of the protocol, which was the main cause of concern, and it's there for those rules that cause significant and lasting damage and change to the everyday ordinary lives of people in Northern Ireland. And once that emergency brake is pulled, it will give the UK government a veto. It is a very powerful cross-community safeguard mechanism that ensures sovereignty for the people of Northern Ireland, and it is part of why this agreement is the right one for the people of Northern Ireland.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Can I be associated with the remarks about Betty Boothroyd? Can I also join with my colleagues, particularly my colleagues in Northern Ireland, sending our love and support to the Caldwell family and every single PSNI officer in uniform today standing up for our peace and democracy. Whilst we have some concerns, particularly about the Stormont break, and we will study the detail of this as we go, we are happy today that things seem to have moved. I would say, though, Mr Speaker, there's been an awful lot of talk, particularly today and over the recent months, about the concerns of the DUP and the unionist community. It is important to remember that the majority of people in Northern Ireland oppose Brexit and do want to see the benefits of dual market access properly utilised. Will the Prime Minister agree with me that it's important now that his government support that and promote that to international investors?
Well, can I thank the honourable gentleman for his engagement with the Secretary of State and myself over recent weeks, and he is right. There is a balance to be struck, and the Good Friday Agreement is about respecting that balance, about the aspirations and identities of all communities in Northern Ireland, and that is what we have sought to achieve with the framework. And as I outlined earlier, something that I and we have heard loud and clear from businesses in Northern Ireland is that they do value their access to the single market. They do value, as all of us do, not having a hard border between the Northern Ireland and the Republic, and that is something that we have had to bear in mind as we consider these negotiations. But I believe we have struck the right balance, and the framework means that this agreement can command the support and consent from communities right across the spectrum in Northern Ireland, and I look forward to working with him and his party to deliver it.
Brandon Lewis.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. And can I please also send my best wishes and align myself with the comments from others earlier today around particularly Detective Chief Inspector John Caldwell. It's a very stark reminder of the courageous and very special work that all PSI officers do every single day that they are working to keep all people in Northern Ireland safe, and we owe them all a great debt for that work. Mr Speaker, can I just say to my right honourable friend, he's absolutely right, and I congratulate him and my colleagues on the front bench for the phenomenal focus that they are putting into ensuring that we can secure a deal that we all, I know, will hope can restore power sharing in Stormont, which is absolutely key for people in Northern Ireland to get back to having good governance in Northern Ireland by elected representatives in Northern Ireland. Another key area for the citizens of Northern Ireland is access to goods, as he has rightly outlined. Can he just confirm for the House today that in this deal we will not only be able to secure free flow of trade for Northern Ireland businesses to Great Britain, but also for Great British businesses into Northern Ireland? Although regulations were preventing some goods, it's great to know that the Great Yarmouth Banger will be able to get back on the supermarket shelves where required in Northern Ireland. But for many businesses, it was the administrative burden of moving from Great Britain to Northern Ireland, not just regulatory, that needed to be removed to allow them to see it as an economic benefit and therefore protect the structural integrity of the UK internal market.
Can I thank my honourable friend, but also pay tribute to him for the work that he did on this topic in his role as Secretary of State for Northern Ireland. It was invaluable in paving the way for me and my colleagues to take forward that work and bring it to a successful conclusion today. And he's right to highlight the administrative burden of moving goods from Great Britain to Northern Ireland. I'm confident that with the new Green Lane, based on using existing ordinary commercial data and data sharing in place of the bureaucratic customer arrangements that were there hitherto, it is an enormous step forward. It delivers what businesses have asked for. We've worked closely with the business community in Northern Ireland to develop it, and I'm confident as they study the detail, they will see that it provides that smooth flow of their goods around the United Kingdom as it should be, and ensures Northern Ireland's place in our UK internal market.
George Howard.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Could I welcome the fact that the document contains a number of references to the need for cross-community support, and the Prime Minister has repeated that phrase a number of times in his statements and in responses. He will be aware, Mr Speaker, that over the last 25 years, one of the significant developments has been a number of people who identify themselves as Northern Irish, as distinct from either British or Irish. Can he give the House some indication of how he's going to gauge the opinion of that 20% of the population who identify themselves in that way, but might not necessarily be represented by a political party?
Prime Minister.
Just say to the honourable gentleman that my approach to this, and indeed the approach of my honourable friend the Secretary of State, is to engage with all communities, all parties, all business groups in Northern Ireland, because Northern Ireland is about balance. It's about respecting the delicate balance that exists in Northern Ireland. That was at the heart of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement. And as I think he's seen, we have gone out of our way to talk and listen to everybody, respecting, of course, the particular concerns of the unionist community. But this framework, this agreement, I believe, gets that balance right. It respects the aspirations and identities of all communities in Northern Ireland, and that's why I believe it is the right way forward.
Sir William Cash.
Mr Speaker, my right honourable friend will know that in the papers that have been published this afternoon, the devil, as ever, lies in the detail. May I seek his assurance that the government will respond to the democratically correct questions that naturally arise on the substance and procedures that are involved, and particularly on the making of EU laws and the European Court, particularly on the Joint Committee and its procedures, and, of course, the Stormont break, not to mention the whole context of sovereignty in this entire process under Section 38 of the Withdrawal Agreement Act 2020. And would he also be good enough to indicate how long a timeline he's proposing for the questions and answers that will be required and how long that might take?
Well, Mr Speaker, can I thank my honourable friend for the engagement that he's had with me in particular, for the advice that he has provided. Section 38 of the Withdrawal Agreement was a testament to him, and it reasserts the sovereignty of this Parliament and in matters of international law, and he was right to do it. I hope that we can strengthen, actually, that particular clause as we consider how best to make sure that we protect the Act of Union and Northern Ireland's place in it. But I would also say to him, in terms of questions, I'm happy to move as quickly as he's able to provide the questions for me, and look forward to engaging in that dialogue with him.
Stephen Furry.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My party can give a broad welcome to this agreement. There are some positives in it that address a range of challenges that have been clear for some period of time. However, for us, the key test is the preservation of Northern Ireland's dual market access. And in that regard, my party has massive concerns around this potential Stormont break. So does the Prime Minister understand that there are real dangers that this process could add more instability into the Assembly? And can I stress to him that the petition of concern is controversial, given its abuse in the past, and also create uncertainty for businesses regarding ongoing single market rules, particularly with a view to investment into Northern Ireland? So will he meet with our party to discuss this in more detail, to clarify what's potentially being proposed?
Can I thank the honourable gentleman for the engagement that he and his colleagues have had with me and the Secretary of State over the recent weeks. It's been helpful, and of course I can assure him I look forward to talking to him again very soon to explain the Windsor Framework in detail, and he makes a good point. There are many people, communities, businesses in Northern Ireland that value their access to the European Union single market. They value, rightly, not having a hard border on the island of Ireland, and we have strived to protect that in this agreement whilst ensuring Northern Ireland's place in our union and protecting and safeguarding its sovereignty. I believe that the Windsor Framework does get that balance right, and I look forward to having that conversation with him.
Sir Mike Penning.
Speaker, can I say at the outset our thoughts and prayers are with the police officer who was attacked by people calling themselves the new IRA, and there's nothing new about people that are callous murderers or attempted murderers. They're still the IRA, and they always will be, like the days when I served in the province. Can I congratulate the Prime Minister on negotiating this excellent agreement? But part of the reason that the EU has moved, perhaps, was the threat of the European bill coming through this House. They clearly woke up and smelt the coffee as to how bad it was going to be for them and for the Republic of Ireland. And do you think that was part of the reason why you got such an excellent deal with the European Union?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm sure that the bill did create the conditions for us to have the negotiation that we did, but as the government said at the time and was clear about, that its preference was always a negotiated outcome if one was available, and today we have achieved a negotiated outcome that provides the certainty and stability that we need, that resolves the issues that we set out to resolve. It safeguards Northern Ireland's sovereignty, it protects its place in the Union and guarantees and provides for the free flow of trade around the UK internal market. It's because we now have the Windsor Framework, this new agreement, that we no longer need the bill and we will no longer proceed with it, and this agreement can start bringing benefit to the people of Northern Ireland as quickly as possible.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As Chair of the All-Party Group on Ireland and the Irish in Britain, the state of relationships between London and Dublin in the last few years has been of great concern to many of us, and the hundreds of people in this place who are of Irish or Irish origin. So we need to look to the future, we need to learn from that. And that in mind, he talks about the Good Friday Agreement in all its dimensions. That includes strands 2 and 3 that offer us great potential, if they're fully implemented, to embed some of this agreement and look to the future. Will he now commit his party and other members here join in, making sure that the operation of strands 2 and 3 and our cooperation with the Irish Government goes forward in a much better sense than it has?
Prime Minister.
I tell the Honourable Lady that the Government is committed to all strands of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement. I've talked a lot about balance and making sure that we get that balance right. But I would pay tribute to my Honourable friend, the Secretary of State, and indeed my Honourable friend, the member for Wickham, for the incredible job that they have done, not just with the agreement, but in particular addressing the issue that she raised. And I'd also put on record my thanks to the Irish Government for the role that they have played and the support they have provided us throughout this process. We look forward to continued positive and constructive dialogue with them. That's what my colleagues and I will do as we make sure that we capitalise on all strands of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement.
Thank
you, Mr. Speaker. Northern Ireland has such a precious and integral place in the United Kingdom. And it certainly seems to me, reflecting back over the last 5 years, that at any point in that time, if this deal had been on the table, those of us who are Brexiteers, those of us who are Remainers, those of us who are Unionists would have jumped on it. So I really heartily congratulate the Prime Minister, the Foreign Secretary, the Secretary of State and the Minister of State for their excellent work and negotiation here. But can my right honourable friend assure us that, in his view, this Windsor Agreement now fully restores the Act of Union and the Belfast Good Friday Agreement?
Prime Minister.
Can I thank my right honourable friend, particularly for her support given her long-standing credentials in this area and the passion with which she believes in our union. I'm grateful to have her support, and I also can give her that assurance. This absolutely does meet the requirements and consistency with the Act of Union and the Belfast Good Friday Agreement, as she rightly said. We've worked very hard to get to an outcome that does, and I'm really pleased that the Windsor Framework delivers for her and everyone else in Northern Ireland.
Sammy Wilson.
Mr. Speaker, I welcome the 18-minute confession which the Prime Minister undertook about the damage which the protocol which his government signed has done to Northern Ireland. But could I remind the Prime Minister that although he talks about 1,700 pages of EU law being removed from Northern Ireland, hundreds of thousands of pages will still remain. Border posts are still being planned to be built, and the Prime Minister has admitted that future EU laws will apply to Northern Ireland unless, under paragraph 52, his government decides not to proceed with law changes for the United Kingdom as a whole, or he vetoes EU proposals in the Joint Committee. Can he understand why we don't have confidence in that, and why we still fear that our position within the United Kingdom is not going to be restored by this agreement?
Mr. Speaker, I think, as the honourable gentleman knows well, the border posts are there to deal with checks in the red lane, and it's something that was always envisaged. It's always something that we said we would do. It's right that for people trying to smuggle goods into the Republic of Ireland via Northern Ireland, that shouldn't happen, and that's why those posts are there, those inspection facilities, and the investment in them is to make sure that we can do those checks properly, as we assured the European Union we would do, and that's part of having a functioning green lane, is having enforcement of the red lane. To his broader point about EU law, as I said, less than 3% of EU law applies in Northern Ireland. It applies with the consent of the people of Northern Ireland. As he knows, the consent vote next year allows them to remove all of these laws and have a new approach. But it is there because, as we've heard, there is a balance to be struck. And Northern Ireland's communities, businesses do value not having a border on the island of Ireland. They do value their access to the single market. And we're at the position where we have the minimum amount of law required to fulfil that purpose. But I believe sovereignty is important. I believe those laws, as they come through, and new ones, as he mentioned, come through, should only come through with the consent and oversight of the people of Northern Ireland. And that's why the Stormont break is so powerful. It puts power in the hands of the Assembly, of him and his colleagues, to decide what's best for Northern Ireland. That's what sovereignty means to me. It means giving Stormont the ability to say no, and I hope that he will give this framework the time and consideration it deserves.
Mark Francois.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the Prime Minister for his statement, and also for publishing both the White Paper and the legal text on the same day, which will materially assist the whole House. As a former Chancellor, he knows well that on Budget Day, the government put a good gloss on whatever they're putting to the public. But then you have to read through the Red Book to just check on the fine detail. He's worked very hard on this, so can he assure me and the whole House that when we go through the Red Book, or in this instance the detailed legal text, we won't find any nasty surprises which would materially undermine the position of Northern Ireland in the United Kingdom?
Prime Minister.
Can I thank my honourable friend for his comments, and I'm pleased that we were able to publish all the documentation. I know this was something that was important not just to him and the honourable member for Stone, but other colleagues as well. It's the right thing to do, and as I said, I want to give everybody the time and the space to consider the detail of the Windsor Framework. I believe it meets the objectives that we set out to do. It provides for the free flow of goods within the United Kingdom. It ensures Northern Ireland's place in our union, and it safeguards sovereignty for the people of Northern Ireland. I look forward to engaging with him and his colleagues over the coming days to answer his questions and provide any clarifications. And I'm confident that when he goes through the detail, he will see that this is a good agreement. It is the right agreement for Northern Ireland, for the people of Northern Ireland, and it's a way for our United Kingdom to move forward together.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and can I associate myself with the comments and sentiments for the families of Betty Boothroyd and DCI Caldwell. The people of Northern Ireland have been through so much. This is a very welcome opportunity to make progress, but as the Prime Minister no doubt knows, Clearing up the messes that other people's make can be a never-ending job. The House of Lords is currently debating a bill that will delete over 60 areas of regulation which are not covered by the protocol. A process that the EU has already said will start a trade war if it goes through, that the Northern Ireland Human Rights Commission says undermines the Good Friday Agreement. It covers issues like electrical safety and food standards and farming standards. So in order to support what he's presented to the House today, will the Prime Minister confirm that all remaining retained EU legislation will be retained in Northern Ireland itself, using the powers that he has that Stormont currently can't exercise? Because if he doesn't, how can anybody have confidence that we will avoid the regulatory divergence and that trade war that could undermine everything he's presented today?
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr Speaker, the rule bill and that legislation is passing separately to these arrangements, but what these arrangements do provide for is for the appropriate sovereignty in Northern Ireland, for the Stormont Assembly to have that say, more than a say, to be able to block new goods, EU goods laws as they come down the pipe if they're not happy with them. And as you'll see in the command paper, we've committed to a range of other things to ensure that we protect against trade and regulatory divergence, including dialogue with businesses in Northern Ireland, but also with the European Union. And as she studies the detail, hopefully she'll be reassured that we've protected properly against that.
Sir Ian Duncan-Smith.
Mr Speaker, can I associate myself with my right honourable friend's comments on Betty Boothroyd, who was my first speaker when I arrived here. She'll be greatly missed, and also with the comments about the brutal attack on Peter Caldwell. Can I commend my right honourable friend for his diligence, hard work and that of his team in pursuing this, regardless of the obstacles that lie in his way, from a reluctance of the EU to admit anything about the problems that have been taking place as a result. And can he remind him that, for me, at the end of the day, the restoration of the Good Friday Agreement, as having served in Northern Ireland myself and lost friends who didn't come back from Northern Ireland, is the #1 item that I see. But on that, I noticed when I was looking through that the Stormont break is not quite as defined as it might be, and I just wondered if he could clear this up. I see there's a phrase there that says it can only be used if there's significant impact specific to everyday life, and I wondered who makes that decision as to what marks significant. And the second point is, can the EU demand countermeasures if it is deployed by them?
Prime Minister.
Can I thank my honourable friend for his comments and pay tribute to his service? I know this is a topic he rightly cares about. And I'm happy to clarify, it's for us to make that determination, whether the threshold has been met. It's right that there is a threshold. This is a serious mechanism, the ability to be able to block new law. It shouldn't be used for trivial reasons. It should be used for those new laws which do have a significant and lasting impact on the everyday lives of people in Northern Ireland. So that is the right trigger. It's one that we are in control of deciding. And it's equally appropriate that if we do that, that the EU will have the right to take appropriate countermeasures. That's there in black and white. Those obviously have to be proportionate. I don't think anyone could disagree with that. But this is a very powerful mechanism, and I'm pleased that we're able to reach resolution on it because, as I said, it ensures that we have restored sovereignty to the people of Northern Ireland.
Liz Saville-Roberts.
There is, of course, much to welcome in today's statement, but I must press the Prime Minister on a specific. In his statement, the Prime Minister casually mentioned the burdens on shipments between Holyhead and Dublin. He failed to mention that pre-Brexit, around 30% of all trade through the port that went on to Northern Ireland from Dublin. That trade is reorientating as we speak in real time, aggravating the already devastating impact of Brexit on the port of Holyhead. Can the Prime Minister clarify whether this new agreement will guarantee seamless trade between Northern Ireland and Wales via Dublin? And if not, will he recognise that green lanes will disadvantage Welsh ports?
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr Speaker, what this is about is ensuring the free flow of goods within our United Kingdom. That's what the Green Lane is there to do. It is always going to be the case after we left the European Union that sending things to the European Union from the UK would be different. And what this agreement is about is prioritising trade within the United Kingdom's internal market, and the Green Lane that we've delivered through this framework does exactly that.
Yeah. Sir John Redwood.
Who will decide which EU laws will apply in Northern Ireland, and on what basis will they make that decision?
Prime Minister.
Well, going forward, Mr. Speaker, when the executive is up and running, as I hope very much that it will be for the Assembly in Northern Ireland to decide. For those good rules in Annex 2, which are the ones of most concern, the Stormont break will apply. There will be a process of scrutiny, and using the petition of concern mechanism, that 30 MLAs from 2 parties can trigger the Stormont break, which then allows the UK government to veto them at that moment. So that's why this is important, because now it will be the institutions of Northern Ireland that get to make that decision.
Ian Paisley.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Can I too add my sincere comments to the attempted murder on DCI call? Well, a person who was on his family here known personally to me, and I thank the Prime Minister for the comments. And I hope that the Sovereign will in fact make a statement about the attempted murder of a police officer in Northern Ireland. I think it would be appropriate and fitting. The Prime Minister has quite rightly indicated that trade is so important to all of our United Kingdom. In paragraph 47 of the paper, it indicates in particular with regards to veterinary medicines for our animals. Our agri-food sector is huge. It feeds multiples of millions of people here in GB. Yet it says that half of all product lines are at risk, and as part of this agreement we have put in place a grace period arrangement that will expire in less than a year and a half. Prime Minister, that is utterly useless for our agricultural sector. That will actually make it more difficult for our farm businesses. Our livestock too, if we move it from County Antrim to Ayrshire, we would have to leave our livestock there if it wasn't sold in the marts in Ayrshire for at least 6 months. That has not been addressed. If the Prime Minister were to move cattle from Yorkshire to Lancashire and was told that we'd have to stay in Lancashire for 6 months, he would be not amused by that. Our farmers are not amused in Northern Ireland. It is our single largest trade. Will these issues be fixed, or is this a failed process already?
Prime Minister.
Well, I joined with the honourable gentleman in supporting our farmers, whether in Northern Ireland or indeed in Yorkshire. And actually, with veterinary medicines, the agreement we have reached, it lasts 3 years till the end of 2025. Which provides us with the time and space to agree a more permanent solution with the European Union, which, as today's framework demonstrates, we are more than capable of doing, as we have resolved all the other issues that were in front of us. And I would point him to the solution that we have reached on human medicines, which I think everyone can agree are of vital importance, where we have achieved a form of dual regulation which ensures the full availability of medicines across the entire United Kingdom, with the UK regulatory authorities being the ones in charge. I think that is what he should look to, alongside all the other things that we have solved today, to have confidence that between now and 3 years in 2025 we will put a permanent footing for vet medicines on the table.
Can I warmly welcome the statement of my right honourable friend and commend him and his entire team on what they have achieved. He seems to have won some jaw-dropping concessions from the EU without giving anything in return. But can I ask him if he agrees with me that alongside the benefits this agreement will bring for the people of Northern Ireland, that it can form the basis of further cooperation with our EU friends on issues that will matter to the entire United Kingdom, so including, for example, trade and investment, science cooperation and illegal migration.
Prime Minister.
Can I thank my honourable friend for his support, but also his advice over the past few weeks as well, which has been invaluable, and I do agree with him, and he's right to highlight in particular illegal migration as well as economic cooperation. This is a priority for this government, and as we have demonstrated in the Home Secretary's work working with the French, that cooperation is yielding benefits, and we can continue to want to do more of that, and I know that he will support those efforts.
Claire Hannah.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I echo the words of solidarity from many across the House for the Caldwell family and for the PSNI, and the rejection of extremist throwbacks who the people of our region are sick and tired of. We all want to see simpler post-Brexit trading arrangements, so we sincerely welcome this progress and commend the Prime Minister on taking a much more constructive approach than his predecessors. I will reiterate that there are many political outlooks in Northern Ireland, and it is a fact that most people, most parties and most business representatives value our
our single market access, our high food standards and our 1998 agreement, so that we maintain the huge opportunity of the protocol? Will he commit his government to loudly championing our unique dual market access? Will he work to prevent vexatious use of the Stormont break? And will he keep a focus on restoration of the Stormont executive to allow those who genuinely believe in democracy and consensus to get back to serving the people they were elected to?
Prime Minister.
Well, I thank the Honourable Lady for her support, and also thank her for the engagement of her and her colleagues that the Secretary of State and I have had over recent weeks. We appreciate it and will continue to do it. And I think she makes a really important point. And Northern Ireland has a unique place, not just within the United Kingdom, but within the entire continent of Europe, of having privileged access to two markets in the way that it does. And as we look forward, what we all want to see is greater prosperity, opportunity and more growth in Northern Ireland. We can build on this framework to deliver more investment and jobs. That's the prize that is available for us. And I know that my colleagues are determined to work with all businesses and parties in Northern Ireland to deliver that. But she's right, the precondition for that is a functioning executive, and we continue to work very hard to see that come about.
Dr. Liam Fox.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I congratulate my right honourable friend and his whole negotiating team, whose quiet confidence and competence has led us to an agreement which, frankly, many people would not have thought possible. And can I ask him to say something specific about the role of the First Minister and Deputy First Minister in the joint committee, which will be key to boosting transparency and accountability? And may I say that, in general terms, may I hope that this new tendency to under-promise and over-delivery becomes the hallmark of the whole government.
Prime Minister.
Can I thank my honourable friend for his support? It does mean much to me, because I know on the topic of Brexit is something that he obviously has thought and done a lot about over the years, so his support means a lot to me. And he's absolutely right. There was a feeling, a fair feeling amongst communities, parties and businesses in Northern Ireland that there simply wasn't enough engagement and representation about how arrangements were being implemented on the ground. We have fixed that with today's framework. There are a range of new structures and mechanisms for that engagement to take place, including for the First Minister and Deputy First Minister to attend those sessions of the Joint Committee that concern the Windsor Framework and anything else in Northern Ireland. That is a positive step forward and ensures that we'll be able to make this work on the ground, and he's absolutely right to highlight it.
Alison McGovern.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Whatever the disagreements that all of us have, it's good to hear the Prime Minister today pay respect to the principles and the detail of the Good Friday Agreement. So can I ask him about our membership of the ECHR, which plays such a central role to that agreement, and can he confirm that under his government we will not be leaving the ECHR?
Prime Minister.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the UK is and will remain a member of the ECHR. Today's agreement is about Belfast Good Friday Agreement. She was right to highlight it and restoring the balance in that agreement, and I'm pleased that the Windsor Framework restores that balance, and I thank her for her support.
Shays Farrell.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Myself with my right honourable friend's comments earlier concerning Betty Boothroyd and DCI Caldwell, and we of course all wish him a speedy recovery. I congratulate my right honourable friend, along with his entire negotiating team, on the massive strides that he has been able to make regarding this very complex and difficult issue, and I, for one, wish him well with this agreement. The Stormont break is critical to the agreement, and I'm particularly pleased that it represents a cross-party consensus basis. Leaving aside the current reasons why Stormont is not sitting, the Prime Minister will be aware that in the past, Stormont has not sat for other reasons used by one or other party. If that were to be the case in the future, is there a default mechanism if the Stormont break cannot be exercised?
Well, can I thank my honourable friend for his support, but also the advice he's provided to me and the team. This is obviously an area that he knows well from his own experience, and we've very much valued his input. Madam Deputy Speaker, the Stormont break is there to be exercised by the Stormont institution. It is a precondition for its use that the institution is up and running, and that's what everyone in this House wants to see, and this is another good reason to get the institutions up and running so that sovereignty can be restored to Northern Ireland, and I look forward to discussing with the parties how the break should work, but it is important that we get the institution up and running so that people in Northern Ireland have the representation they need. This Windsor Framework delivers that ability, but ultimately it's for the people and parties of Northern Ireland to take it forward.
Jim Shannon.
Madam Deputy Speaker, you're my Prime Minister, so I say this with great respect. This is about more than just solar panels and sausages. It's crucial that the Windsor Framework, which you've referred to, does not become the Windsor Knot for us Unionists in Northern Ireland. So does the PM understand that any deal which does not include cessation of the European Court of Justice interference in the UK sovereignty, in other words, the real power must lie with Westminster, not with Brussels? The cessation of the state aid prohibition, the cessation of customs protocols within the UK determined by Europe, and the 7 tests set by the DUP and supported by the majority of Unionists within Northern Ireland. The Prime Minister can strike no deal, ever, without bringing the majority of Unionists on board, and to push another deal through this House without Unionist buy-in will offer no result other than another failed deal.
Well,
Prime Minister.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I hope the honourable gentleman takes the time to study the deal in detail, and I hope that he will see, after he's done that it delivers against the objectives that I set out, because it does mean that we can have smoothly flowing trade within our UK internal market. It does mean that we have protected Northern Ireland's place in the Union, and it does mean that we have restored and safeguarded sovereignty for the people of Northern Ireland. I know that those are objectives that he shares. This agreement delivers them. I look forward to engaging with him and his colleagues as they study the detail so that we can hopefully move forward together. But I'm confident that this is a good basis and a good agreement for the people of Northern Ireland.
Sir Robert Buckland.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. My right honourable friend and the government are to be warmly commended for their statecraft in achieving a significant deal with significant movement from the EU, who now, I think, understand the primacy of the first strand of the Good Friday Agreement, North-South, and East-West, the third strand as well. And does he agree with me that this framework now gives a very clear basis in international law for the government to press ahead with bringing forward some of the measures in the UK Internal Markets Bill that clearly were in conflict with the international law obligations that existed under the old protocol?
I thank my right honourable friend, and he makes an excellent point, and he will remember that the government had to drop certain provisions from the UKIM bill guaranteeing unfettered access for Northern Ireland producers into GB because they were in conflict with our international obligations under the protocol. I'm pleased that today we can announce, and as in the command paper, that we will legislate to put on statute unfettered access for Northern Ireland producers into Great Britain. That is something that the Windsor Framework makes possible, and he's absolutely right to highlight it.
Joanna Cherry.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Prime Minister is to be commended for tackling one aspect of the mess left behind by his predecessor but one. But of course we should not forget that the Prime Minister himself and most of his colleagues voted for that mess. Madam Deputy Speaker, it's very important to be clear about the role of the European Court of Justice in this framework. The EU President, Ursula von der Leyen, has said this afternoon that the European Court of Justice will still have the final say on EU law and single market issues. That's correct, isn't it?
Yes, as a simple matter of fact, it is the European Court of Justice which is the final arbiter on matters of EU law. That's what the President said. She's right. That is simply the legal fact of the case.
Greg Clark.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I strongly welcome my right honourable friend's personal achievement, ably supported by the Foreign Secretary and the Northern Ireland Secretary in securing this deal. It is wholly wrong that the European Commission damaged scientific research by blocking the UK's association with the Horizon and Copernicus programmes and nuclear cooperation through Euratom, which have nothing whatsoever to do with the Northern Ireland Protocol. Mrs von der Leyen earlier today indicated that the EU had changed its mind on this, changed its position. Is that my right honourable friend's understanding? If so, scientists and engineers will welcome it, but will he implement a viable UK alternative should delays persist?
Prime Minister.
Well, I thank my right honourable friend for his support, and he's right to highlight the many areas of cooperation that we can and should have with the European Union. Science research is one, but illegal migration is another that the right honourable gentleman for Bromsgrove brought up, and the whole range of possibilities around energy security, climate change and others. But he's also right that we should always reserve the ability to have a UK alternative to Horizon. That is something the government said it would do, and I know that he has fed in about how best to do that, and I look forward to having that dialogue with him as well.
Colin Lockhart.
Can I be associated with the remarks regarding the death of Baroness Boothroyd, and also with DCI John Caldwell and his young son who witnessed the horrific attack? Our thoughts and prayers continue to be with them. Much has been spoken in this House already of the Stormont break and the power that it has. Can the Prime Minister confirm that the Stormont break has the ability to not only end dynamic alignment of EU law, but gives unionists or anyone else the opportunity to meaningfully impact whether the legislation applies in Northern Ireland?
Prime Minister.
Madam Deputy Speaker, that is exactly the point of the Stormont break. It's based on the petition of concern mechanism, a Good Friday Agreement institution. It requires 30 MLAs from 2 parties, and if it is triggered, then that provides the UK government with a veto over that particular law. It obviously, as I've committed to, we will consult with parties in Northern Ireland and the Assembly about how best to codify how the UK government uses that veto, but she can absolutely have that assurance.
Oliver Hill.
I join the tributes to Betty Boothroyd, who was a wonderful speaker and actually very popular in my area, where she lived nearby. Would the Prime Minister agree with me that the UK-EU Partnership Parliamentary Assembly has been very supportive of the negotiations, and I know that our membership, both in this place, the other place, and in European Parliament, will be delighted with this outcome. And just on a legal side, would he agree with me that to have put the underpinning for the protocol in international law rather than EU law is a big step forward, as is the dispute resolution changes with arbitration and the Northern Ireland courts deciding the cases rather than anyone else?
Prime Minister.
Can I thank my honourable friend's chairmanship of the partnership from our side. He and they do valuable work, and I've been grateful, as have the Secretary of State, for their support during this process. And he makes an excellent point. It is a significant development that the Vienna Convention, the law of treaties, is in the political declaration. It changes or reaffirms the international basis for the treaty. I thank him for his support of that, and he's absolutely right about the importance that we should attach to it.
Sir Chris Bryant.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. At the risk of adding to the sense of repetition this evening, can I say this is all really good news? Hurrah! And can I congratulate not only the Prime Minister but the Foreign Secretary and the Northern Ireland Secretary, and can I particularly point out the Right Honourable Member for Wickham, because I think sometimes he has shown that compromise may be costly, but it pays enormous dividends. So I'm grateful to him and to the whole team. Can I just urge the Prime Minister to take up one suggestion that came some few years ago now from one of his other predecessors, the Right Honourable Member for Maidenhead. She said at the beginning of triggering, she's not in her seat, I'm afraid, she said that at the beginning of triggering Article 50 that she wanted to have an EU-UK security treaty. With many of the issues facing the whole of the continent at the moment, isn't this precisely the time when we could look forward to such a treaty?
Well, can I join the honourable gentleman in paying tribute to my honourable friend from Wickham? He's absolutely right to shower praise on him. Not only has he been instrumental in providing the intellectual underpinning for many of the arrangements that we have adopted in the Green Lane, his diplomacy, particularly with the Irish, but also with parties in Northern Ireland, has proved invaluable for getting us to the point that we're in today, and I thank him for it. And more broadly, as we've heard previously, there are many areas of cooperation we can have with our European friends and partners, and particularly over the last year, that cooperation with regards to Ukraine, as it comes to our security, whether it's sanctions policy or providing support, I think has been positive and invaluable, and hopefully that's something that we can build on.
Vicky Ford.
As a member of this House who was born and raised in Omagh, can I send my love and prayers to DCI John Caldwell? This is my Omagh school notebook from when I was 6. Thursday, 13th of December. Last night, a bomb went off in the police barracks. Gillian's house has no glass in her windows. Can I thank my right honourable friend for the words he said about not looking back? We must move forward and put that behind us. Can I congratulate him on an extraordinarily bespoke deal that sorts out the practicalities but also preserves the Belfast Good Friday Agreement?
Prime Minister.
Can I pay tribute to my honourable friend for her work, but also her comments just now, which were powerful and moving. And she's right that we must look forward, and we won't let those who want to take us back be successful. And stability in Northern Ireland is important, and it's about the balance of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement, as she knows better than many, and we have strived very hard to restore that balance with the Windsor Framework. I believe that it does that, and I look forward to working with her and colleagues from across the House so that we can look forward to a brighter future for everyone in Northern Ireland.
Kevin Robinson.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker, and can I thank the Prime Minister and colleagues right across the House for their care and concern for DCI John Caldwell and his family. Madam Deputy Speaker, the Prime Minister knows that it's good to talk, and he will recall that when we met back in November last year, I acknowledged that I had good ideas around the friction of trade, but I highlighted my concern around the democratic deficit and constitutional harm. Anyone who reads tittle-tattle on a Sunday yesterday may recall that I had similar such concerns just 10 days ago. But can I acknowledge, genuinely, that on both constitutional harm and on democratic deficit, progress has been made? And can I say to the Prime Minister that over the coming weeks and indeed months, as we look to engage with our community, to engage with communities and businesses right throughout Northern Ireland, to test and probe and tease the tense aspects of the implementation of this framework agreement, that while we do that, he recognises that for us, ratification is an important thing. And does he recognise that having had so many false dawns and failed starts over the last 4 or 5 years of political commitments from that side of the House, that ratification will need to occur before we can take any final decisions?
Prime Minister.
Madam Deputy Speaker, can I thank the honourable gentleman for his intervention and also thank him for the engagement that he has had with me and the Secretary of State. It is good to talk, and there has been plenty of it, and it has been extremely valuable in us reaching today's framework and agreement. And I can assure him that I will give him and his colleagues in community the time and the space to consider the detail, and that I will work with him to answer any questions that they have, to provide any clarifications that I can, so that hopefully we can move forward together, because I believe that is what he and the vast majority of people in Northern Ireland want to do. But he's right, and I acknowledge the frustrations that they feel about what has gone before, but I hope today means that we can start a new chapter as we look forward and build a brighter future for Northern Ireland together, and I welcome doing that with him.
Sir Robert Neal.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I congratulate the Prime Minister upon an exceptional achievement, because we've resolved something which was difficult. We've done it in accordance to law. And I'm glad to see the attorney here, because the fact that you've acted in international law is immensely important. Can I then ask him to turn his mind to one small other matter, which is Gibraltar? I'm glad to see the Foreign Secretary with him. If we can resolve the issues in relation to Northern Ireland, can we now swiftly move with the Foreign Secretary's support to resolve a few remaining issues for the territory of Gibraltar, which requires a few adjustments and good sense to get itself into a better position in our new relationships going forward?
Prime Minister.
Can I thank my honourable friend for his warm words of support and assure him that the Foreign Secretary in particular is intensely engaged with his counterparts in Spain to try and find resolution on the issues that are outstanding, but also join him in paying tribute to the attorney for the support and advice that she's provided to us throughout this process. It has been invaluable. Her and the previous Attorney General did exceptional work on this tricky issue, and I'm glad he is pleased with today's outcome.
Mary Kelly-Foy.
Whilst I welcome the progress made today, due to recent government's wasted years of arguing with the unionist parties instead of negotiating with them to bring about a deal, many communities in Northern Ireland have been ravaged by poverty and debt and the rise of paramilitary gangs preying on ordinary people just wanting to live their lives. So will the Prime Minister commit to ensuring that the new protocol will begin to repair the damage done and restore peace and prosperity for all communities in Northern Ireland?
Prime Minister.
Full House, I do believe that the new arrangements we've made, the Windsor Framework, does provide the basis for peace and prosperity and stability in Northern Ireland. That's why I have brought it forward and why we have worked so hard on it. And as we have done so, we have strived very hard to respect the identity and aspirations of all communities in Northern Ireland. Balance is at the heart of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement. The Windsor Framework restores that balance and ensures that we can move forward positively together.
Sir Julian Lewis.
In difficult negotiations, the late great Ronald Reagan used to say, "Trust but verify," which I took to mean be optimistic but have a reserve plan. It sounds as if the reserve plan here is the Stormont break, but as my right honourable friend for North West Cambridgeshire has said, that might not apply if for any reason Stormont was not sitting. So is the Prime Minister satisfied that there is a plan B that would work under all circumstances?
Prime Minister.
Father House, this is incredibly important because it is what we should be focused on is Stormont being up and running. Right? The people of Northern Ireland need and deserve their institutions to be functioning for them. And I think it's entirely right that we have vested this power, this sovereignty in the institution that represents them and not exercise it on their behalf, but instead our priority should be getting the institutions back up and running so that sovereignty is restored and the people of Northern Ireland are in control of their destiny.
Alan Smith.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. We welcome this, and I would commend the achievement that helping mitigate the disaster has represented. But can I dig into the Stormont backstop? Because I'm concerned that in fixing one problem, there's a recipe for further instability going forward. If the petition of concern is the model for what the Stormont backstop is going to be, and there's the concerns which we all admit about the petition of concern, what scope is there going to be for the Secretary of State going forward to rule on the, let's be blunt, reasonableness of any such petition? And then when it gets to the Joint Committee, in what scenario can the Joint Committee overrule the petition? Because if the petition is at either stage seen to be politically or legally automatic, surely that cements in more problems to this than we're solving tonight. Thank you.
Prime Minister.
I just assure the honourable gentleman there is a well-defined process for the exercise of the Stormont break. And he's right, there should be, because it is a very serious step. It's a serious and powerful mechanism. It should not be exercised for trivial reasons. It is there to deal with new or amended laws that provide significant and lasting change and impact on the people and communities of Northern Ireland. That is a test that rightly should be met, and there is a defined process for how that has to happen with consultation which rightly should take place. But ultimately, if that petition of concern mechanism is used, and again that is the right mechanism to use, I believe, it is a Good Friday Agreement framework that provides for cross-community safeguards, then the UK government will have a veto. And I see, as he engages with the detail of how it works, he will see that we have struck the right balance between having something very powerful but making sure that there is a well-defined and appropriate process leading up to that point.
Sir Edward Lee.
Our opinion on mainland Britain is vital in all this. It's a pretty obvious point, but it all depends on our colleagues in the DUP. Because unless this exercise gets Stormont up and running, it's pretty futile. Indeed, it might be downright dangerous. So when the Prime Minister in the next few weeks provide space for DUP, will he undertake not just to listen to their concerns, but if there is something that can get this over the line, a further clarification or a change, he will take that back to the Commission? Because I can assure him many of his colleagues on these benches are watching the DUP very carefully, and we will go where they go.
Prime Minister.
Well, with the greatest respect for the House, I'd also say to the honourable gentleman, this is also about the people of Northern Ireland. It's about the communities in Northern Ireland, the businesses in Northern Ireland, and whatever happens with the politics, those people will benefit from this agreement. Because they are being impacted by the implementation of the protocol, and this framework ensures that we have resolved their concerns and the challenges that they face. And they must be uppermost in our mind, and I hope very much that this framework does provide the basis for parties in Northern Ireland to move forward together, to positively, to consider power sharing, as I hope that they will look forward to doing. But this agreement, first and foremost, is about the people in Northern Ireland and the benefits that it will bring to them, and I hope that it will have his support.
Catherine McKinnon.
This agreement is clearly welcome, but he must recognise that the government's approach prior to this point caused damaging uncertainty, put Britain's reputation at risk and undermined business confidence, and he must want to do everything possible to make amends for that. The EU retained law bill continues to generate massive uncertainty with its regulatory cliff edge. So, in his new spirit of renegotiating decisions, taking a more mature approach, will he also commit to reconsidering the government's approach on that issue?
Prime Minister.
Well, no, and the honourable lady, it's actually it's that approach that creates the uncertainty. In talking about it in those terms, it's a perfectly reasonable thing for the United Kingdom to re-examine all the retained EU law that we inherited, to decide which bits are for us to keep, which bits are worth scrapping, and which bits are worth amending. That's entirely the appropriate course of action for a sovereign nation, and in doing that, we can actually provide benefit to families, businesses, communities across the United Kingdom, and that's what this government will deliver.
Kevin Foster.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. Having spent 2 years at the Home Office working on the plans to implement the Northern Ireland Protocol in full if it had been needed, there are some welcome aspects to this agreement, although there are of course other areas that will need to be studied in further detail. One particular thought that comes to mind, it's welcome the green and red lanes, is the fact there is an EU team based at Belfast Port. In fact, they actually hosted in a Home Office facility because they didn't have anywhere of their own. What role does he see them playing? Particularly, there will inevitably be some attempts to abuse the green lane. We'll be aware of that. That is going to happen. Who would take the lead on the law enforcement approach to that, and who would decide whether that sort of action is taken, in particular to make sure that actually it's about responding to genuine concerns. It doesn't come away, for example, as we've seen at other borders with the EU, to put checks in place where we would actually feel they are an undue burden.
Well, the Honourable Gentleman makes an excellent point with his own experience as a previous Home Office Minister, but he's absolutely right that we do need to enforce these lanes, and that's the assurance that we've rightly provided, and that's why we have those facilities there. And what I can say to him is there aren't any routine checks as goods move from GB to NI. Any checks that there will be because we have reason to suspect, based on intelligence or other risk analysis, smuggling or other criminality, and that's why we will be intervening. But those will not be routine. They will be risk and intelligence based to deal with exactly the problem that he highlighted. And if we're going to have a functioning green lane, it's right that we enforce that properly.
Gregory Campbell.
Could I join the tributes to the late Betty Boothroyd and also to the outstanding bravery of DCI John Caldwell in Omagh last week? Prime Minister, when you were at the press conference with Madam von der Leyen this afternoon, you indicated that we all collectively share an ambition to avoid a hard border, and that's why there's a role for EU law in Northern Ireland. This is the umpteenth time this mistake has been made by successive Prime Ministers. There won't be any possibility of a so-called hard border, not because of Mark 1 of the protocol or Mark 2 of the protocol, but because of the 300-mile land border that has over 280 crossing points, making a hard border an impossibility. Does he agree with me what I told him last week, that just as years ago the representatives of nationalism in Northern Ireland needed to be content with governance arrangements in Northern Ireland, that equally now the representatives of unionism has to be content with government's arrangements going forward?
Prime Minister.
Well, I'd say to the honourable gentleman that I have spent a lot of time, care and attention listening and engaging with the concerns of unionism in Northern Ireland, their concerns with the protocol, and they've been uppermost in my mind as we've gone through these deliberations, and I have strived and tried my utmost to deliver against those objectives, and I believe that this framework does do that. But he talks about the role of EU law, and I would say to him and his colleagues and everyone else, that is the reason that it is there, but ultimately it is for the people of Northern Ireland to decide. He knows, as I do, that there is a consent vote that happens next year that provides approval for that set of arrangements, but I recognise that that is a blunt mechanism. It is an all-or-nothing mechanism, and it is right that we have greater sovereignty for the people of Northern Ireland. The Stormont break delivers it. It allows the Assembly, it allows 30 colleagues from 2 parties to decide if the new EU laws, Annex 2, that were put in the test of his party, if those are ones that he feels are unacceptable, that then there will be an ability to block them working with the UK government. I think it is a powerful safeguard for Northern Ireland's sovereignty. It is something that I hope he gives time and consideration to, and I look forward to engaging with him and his colleagues over the coming days and weeks on it.
Robin Walker.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. Can I associate myself first with the remarks of the Prime Minister about Detective Chief Inspector John Caldwell and his family, but can I congratulate him on the personal commitment he has made to this process, and in particular being the first British Prime Minister in over a decade to attend the British-Irish Council, unlocking precious goodwill through that process, but the diplomatic efforts that he and his team made have been phenomenal. Will he ensure that as we hopefully reap the fruits of this process in the restoration of the devolved institutions in Northern Ireland, he maintains that personal engagement in Northern Ireland affairs, which is so crucial, and continues to listen to the concerns of Northern Irish Unionists to no detriment to the nationalist community?
Prime Minister.
Can I thank my honourable friend for his support, and also it's an area that I know he knows well, and I can give him that assurance. We will continue to engage, as we have done, with all communities and parties in Northern Ireland, but I have paid particular attention to the concerns of the unionist community and their elected representatives from all parties in this process, because I believe that is the right thing to do. But ultimately, I can give him the assurance that I will continue to be personally involved, committed and engaged with this topic, and that's because I'm Prime Minister for Great Britain and Northern Ireland, Prime Minister for the United Kingdom, and it is a responsibility that I take incredibly seriously.
Jonathan Edwards.
Mr Deputy Speaker. If I understand the so-called Stormont break correctly, is it not the case that the Northern Ireland Assembly will have more power over how EU single market rules apply in their territory than the Welsh and Scottish Parliaments will have over how UK internal market rules apply in Wales and Scotland?
Indeed, yep.
Prime Minister.
I'm glad that the honourable gentleman has recognised how powerful the Stormont break is. It's absolutely right, given the circumstances uniquely in Northern Ireland, that they do have that sovereignty. It was missing. There was a democratic deficit given the unique circumstances of Northern Ireland, and I'm glad that the Windsor Framework and indeed the Stormont break eliminates that democratic deficit and restores the appropriate and right sovereignty to the people of Northern Ireland.
Lawrence Robertson.
Can I congratulate the Prime Minister on the progress he's made on what is a very difficult issue? For clarification, can I ask him, if there's a manufacturer in Northern Ireland whose products have no intention of being exported, they're going to remain in the internal market, do they obey UK standards or do they have to obey EU standards?
Prime Minister.
Well, it will depend on what they're producing. I'll say that to the honourable gentleman. Actually, for a large chunk of manufacturing goods, there are no international or EU standards, so they are all produced to UK standards, whether that's clothing, furniture, bicycles, homewares, and the like. With regard to the other 3,500 manufacturing goods standards that there are, they are actually all international standards. So even though they may be named as EU, they are all the same as the ones that we have in the UK, because that's what both the EU and the UK committed to doing in the TCA. If he looks at those 3,500 manufacturing standards, he will find that I think there are only 11 that are different between the EU and the UK. That's 0.3%, and in most of those cases the UK standards are higher, as it turns out, than the EU ones, and this is a good framework a good deal for manufacturing in Northern Ireland. I've spent time engaging with those businesses. They value their dual market access. They value unfettered access to the rest of the United Kingdom. They want the free flow of goods within the UK internal market. This framework delivers for them, and it delivers for the businesses of Northern Ireland.
Paul Blomfield.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. The Prime Minister gave a devastating critique of the Northern Ireland Protocol, negotiated by his predecessor, but one who is conspicuously absent today. Now, clearly, he was right. So this agreement is good news. But can I press him a little further on an earlier answer that he gave? Specifically, will he confirm that the agreement opens up the door to association with Horizon Europe, and will he actively seek it, recognising its importance to our universities and our research ambition as a country?
Well, as I said, research cooperation is one of the many areas that we can continue to cooperate with the EU. Our focus today is on the Windsor Framework to ensure that we can resolve the issues with the protocol and move forward for Northern Ireland. And that will be our continued focus in the coming days, to make sure that we can talk and explain and clarify this particular agreement. But of course, over time, there'll be a range of other areas that we can work with the EU on, including energy security, research, but also illegal migration. And I look forward to all those conversations.
Alberto Costa.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. South Leicestershire is home to one of the largest logistics parks in the whole of Europe. Will the Prime Minister reassure those businesses in South Leicestershire that trade across the UK, specifically Northern Ireland, that his Windsor Framework will allow for smoother trade between Great Britain and Northern Ireland?
I can give my honourable friend that assurance. The smooth flow of trade around our UK internal market is central to what this framework delivers. It builds on the proposals that my honourable friend from Wickham put forward some years ago. I'm pleased that we've been able to put those in practice in the delivery of our Green Lane, and I know that the cause of the Union is one that my honourable friend cares passionately and rightly about, and I'm pleased that this framework strengthens our Union.
Paul Govan.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. Prime Minister, just before I start off, I would like to pass on my thoughts and prayers to the DCI Caldwell's family at this time, and to the wider PSNI family, who I know are fearful of what might potentially happen. And I don't put this as being any accident. I think the timing of such incidents are crucial to what we're even discussing here today. But I want to just ask Prime Minister, in relation to what we call the green and red lanes. I enter a country and I always see a border, and at a border you will have green and red lanes. I still have the perception that I'm at a border, irrespective of what I see, because I'm being told that there are green and red lanes. That does cause concern. The other aspect that I have real concern for, I'm glad it's called a framework, because a framework is something which has to be built and added to, and I'm glad that it's not actually an agreement as such, because an agreement we see is written in stone and can't be changed, as we were told by the so-called protocol bill that we had, or protocol deal that we had before, and it could not be changed, and those who wanted to change it said we couldn't. And I'm glad to see that we have a number of what I call people who have been converted over to actually taking a slightly different stance in relation to what we had to endure and we voted against. But in doing so, I have a lot of agricultural businesses in my constituency, many of which would bring cattle back and forward to the did bring cattle back and forward to mainland GB for shows or for sale. And now I am reading today, or hearing today, that yes, if you have a pet, you might be better calling your cow one of your pets rather than so you can bring it back. I want to ensure that this does not happen, and we are allowed to bring back our cattle and everything else. And any involvement in the ECJ does cause major concern for me, because that means I am still taking laws that I have had no control in bringing forward.
Well, I'd say to the honourable gentleman, to his last point, the whole point about the Stormont break is so that he does have control over those laws. So I hope when he engages with the detail of it, he will see that we have fixed that problem and put him and his colleagues in the Assembly in charge of their destiny and making sure that they're in control of their laws. But he talks about agriculture. In fact, in all the engagement and knowledge I have of the agricultural sector, it's actually one where dual market access is incredibly important. He talked about cattle. He will know that the dairy industry on the island of Ireland is deeply integrated. The meat processing industry, deeply integrated. All of those businesses said to the Secretary of State, that they wanted to ensure no disruption to those supply chains, back and forth between the Northern Ireland and the Republic, and anything that put that at jeopardy would be a mistake for them, their jobs, and that is what this framework delivers. It ensures that we've protected Northern Ireland's place in the Union, ensured the free flow of goods around our UK internal market, safeguarded the sovereignty of the Northern Irish people, but crucially, protected exactly those agricultural businesses and the things that were important to them. And I hope when he studies the detail, and I look forward to discussing it with them, he will see that we have struck the right balance, the right thing for Northern Ireland, its businesses, its agricultural industry, and I hope that it's something that he will engage with me on.
David Jones.
Mr Deputy Speaker, the command paper tells us that the framework narrows the range of EU rules applicable in Northern Ireland to less than 3% overall by the EU's own calculations, which is, of course, highly welcome. Would my right honourable friend agree to publishing a definitive list of the EU rules that will remain so that colleagues may consider them when assessing the impact of the agreement?
I'm happy to look at it. I think that list already exists, Mr Deputy Speaker, but the key thing is exactly that. It is less than 3%. It is there in black and white. I'm not pretending it's not there, and it's there for the reasons that we have discussed earlier today. It's about ensuring no border between Northern Ireland and the Republic. It's about ensuring those Northern Ireland producers that value it and businesses have access to the EU single market. But crucially, even though it is less than 3%, it is there with the consent of the Northern Irish people. And this is what is the most important thing, less whether it's 3%, 5%, 2%, but whatever is there with consent. It was there with a consent vote next year, but that vote was too blunt. And with the Stormont break mechanism today, we have ensured that the institutions and people of Northern Ireland are the ones that decide the laws that they want to adopt. That is the right way to approach this problem. It respects the balance necessary in Northern Ireland. It respects the needs of all communities, what businesses want. And I look forward to discussing it with my right honourable friend in the coming days.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. The issues with the Northern Ireland Protocol have damaged our communities, our economy, our democracy. And so, of course, I welcome this agreement and look forward to a better working relationship with the European Union, including on science. And when the Northern Ireland Protocol delays meant that we could not associate with the Horizon programme, his government committed that every penny meant for science would be spent on science. £2.5 billion was set aside for association with Horizon, 900 million was spent on guarantees, 1.5 billion was taken out of the budget back to Treasury quietly last week. Now he has the deal. Will he commit to his promises on science?
Mr Speaker, just diverting slightly from Northern Ireland Protocol and the new Windsor Framework, the government has committed to spend £20 billion on research and development. It's a record amount. This government has created a brand new department of innovation, science and technology because we care about it so much. I know that's something that she will support, and that's how we're going to drive growth and prosperity in every part of our United Kingdom in the coming years.
Sir Geoffrey Clifton-Brown.
Also pay my tributes to the family and to pre-CI John Caldwell himself, and hope he makes a good recovery. May I congratulate the Prime Minister and his team on doing something that many people said was impossible. A negotiation which contains the red and green lanes, which eases goods flows, on a legal framework which is fundamentally different from the protocol. Would he agree with me that this negotiation, this Windsor Agreement, provides the prospect of investors investing with confidence in Northern Ireland to create new jobs, and it is the people of Northern Ireland that will benefit from this agreement.
My honourable friend is absolutely right, and it's something that I know my honourable friend from Wickham is specifically focused on. It's about using this framework, this agreement, as the basis to provide certainty and stability in Northern Ireland and thereby attract considerable private investment. That is what we are focused on delivering. That is the prize that is available for us if we can use the Windsor Framework as a way to move forward and restore power sharing in Northern Ireland, because Northern Ireland will have a very special place, not just in the UK, but in the European continent. That is incredibly attractive to international investors and businesses. They are keen to see this resolved so they can start investing, creating jobs and opportunity, and that's what my honourable friend for Wickham is keen to deliver.
Kirsty Blackman.
Can the Prime Minister be clear with the House that this agreement does not get us any closer to being readmitted to the Horizon Europe programme, to our universities, to Northern Irish universities being readmitted to this programme?
They are two completely separate things, and the Windsor Framework is about resolving the issues that were there with the Northern Ireland Protocol. It's about safeguarding Northern Ireland's place in the Union, the free flow of goods around our internal market, and sovereignty being restored for the Northern Irish people. She would have heard the comments from President von der Leyen earlier today, and the government's position on that remains the same.
Richard Graham.
Mr Deputy Speaker, as a Northern Ireland Unionist family member, I wholeheartedly congratulate the Prime Minister and all those involved with the Windsor Framework for resolving issues that have been so damaging to the integrity of the UK and our own UK internal market, and for providing the best opportunity for Northern Ireland to thrive. So will my right honourable friend and all the political parties in Northern Ireland now work to resume government from Stormont as soon as possible and before the 25th anniversary of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement, so that the people of Northern Ireland get the quality and scrutiny of public services that they deserve?
Well, I agree with my honourable friend about the importance of restoring power sharing and the institutions there for the people of Northern Ireland. That's what they need and deserve. But I know he would agree with me. The right thing is to give all communities in Northern Ireland the time and the space to reflect on the detail of this substantive agreement and come to a considered judgment. I look forward to engaging with those communities and parties over the coming days to have that conversation. But I hope that this can provide a basis for us to move forward positively together.
Leila Moran.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. May I welcome the change in approach, the cooperative spirit with which we've got to this point, and the positive and hopefully pragmatic relationship moving forward. But there's one area that hasn't been mentioned as a potential area to work with the EU, and that's agri-foods. You just need to look at the furore this week over turnips versus tomatoes to see what a difference it would make to our constituents in this cost of living crisis. Will he commit to looking again at a UK-EU veterinary agreement which would ease some of those supply chain issues and build on that positive relationship that I note that he wants to have with the European Union?
Hear, hear.
I think that the issues that we've seen over recent times have got little to do with our institution and political frameworks and everything to do with the weather, but we are committed to agri-food innovation. In particular, our gene editing bill is something that farmers across the UK welcome and will deliver, and it will be good for our food security going forward, and we continue to support our farmers to do that.
Crispin Blunt.
A remarkable negotiating success, with the EU agreeing to hitherto unique terms in an international treaty. Whilst all associated with this negotiation deserve congratulation, its tone, its courtesy, its calm, conscientious command of detail was set by him, and he gave our negotiating partners every reason to agree. And this deal is a huge tribute to the finest qualities of his leadership.
Can I thank my honourable gentleman for those very, very warm and I fear over-generous words, but I thank him nonetheless. But also, just it would be remiss not to pay tribute to my colleagues sitting behind me, who have worked in private, in confidence, behind the scenes for some months to bring us to this place. They deserve enormous credit, supported by the Honourable Member for Wickham as well. It is an achievement of collective minds, but many people on this House in their various ways have contributed to getting to this point, and I hope that everyone around this House can now support this agreement as a basis to provide a better future for the people in Northern Ireland.
Stephen Kinnock.
Sir, the scrapping of tariffs on steel will be welcomed by steelworkers in the Talbot Steelworks in my constituency, but could I press the Prime Minister on the issue of non-tariff barriers? Firstly, can he confirm that quotas will also be scrapped? And secondly, he'll be aware that the European Union is introducing a carbon border adjustment mechanism. Can he confirm that the Windsor Framework will eliminate the risk of there being a carbon border in the Irish Sea?
The UK government is also exploring the mechanisms for a carbon border adjustment mechanism. It's something the Treasury has started consulting on last year, and that's actually one of the dialogues that we have with the European Union, and indeed other countries who are considering such mechanisms to ensure that they can work in a complementary fashion. The work for all of these things is at a relatively early stage, so there's lots of development work to be done to make sure that we implement them.
Dr. Ben Spencer.
Mr Deputy Speaker, and can I congratulate my right honourable friend for securing this historic deal, ensuring our ongoing relationship with the EU works for all parts of our United Kingdom. And does he agree with me that Brexit is the beginning of our new relationship, not the end, and that with so many, particularly with so many challenges facing us, we'll continue to work with all our international partners so that all our agreements, current and yet to be finalised, work to benefit us all?
I thank my honourable friend and wholeheartedly agree with him. This framework provides a positive basis to move forward, ensures we respect the balance of all communities, and I look forward to working with him and other colleagues to make sure that we realise the full potential of what we've achieved today.
Fleur Anderson.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. This is certainly an entirely different definition of an oven-ready deal. Instead of being good to go, it's taken years, has to be eaten in instalments, and with an interim serving of, by his own admission, a dog's dinner. This deal is very welcome, but the government actions have done serious damage to Britain's reputation for upholding the rule of law. Looking forward, will the Prime Minister commit today that the government will never again ask members of this House to vote on legislation that breaks international law?
Mr Deputy Speaker, what the Windsor Framework does is provide a legally sound, sustainable basis on which to move forward. It brings enormous improvement to the situation in Northern Ireland. It safeguards Northern Ireland's position in the Union, but also ensures that it is in a framework of international law. The points made about the Vienna Convention are important, are there in the political declaration, and allows businesses, families and communities in Northern Ireland to plan with certainty for the future and a brighter future that it can be.
Ray Chishti.
Speaker, I thank the Prime Minister for his commitment, hard work and the constructive engagement with our European counterparts. As a former sanctions minister, it's absolutely crucial to work with our European counterparts to achieve what we need to achieve with regards to what happens in Russia. As somebody who resigned from government in all aspects, from party, over Brexit and the delivery of the backstop, with real concerns over sovereignty, can I ask the Prime Minister this? Of course, what he's trying to do has to be welcome to move in the dial in a constructive way. With regards to the Stormont break, having looked at the previous emergency break by David Cameron, which unfolded with concerns, can I ask him this? When he says time and space will be given to consider this, there is details to be considered. How long does he think that time will be, and when does he consider bringing this back to Parliament so we can consider that and have look at this in detail?
Well, Mr Deputy Speaker, it's important that people do have the time and space to consider it, but I hope we can move through that process with speed, not least because what we all want to see is a restored executive in Northern Ireland. That's what people in Northern Ireland need and deserves. All of us would like to see that happen as quickly as possible, whilst respecting the need for communities to discuss the detail of this. But I look forward to doing that and make myself available as quickly as possible.
Martin Doherty-Hughes.
I thank the Prime Minister for spending over 2 hours on a statement. I think you all know the importance of it. Mr Deputy Speaker, on page 26, the Prime Minister in his statement and on various occasions talks that the Windsor Framework goes further still, safeguarding sovereignty for the people of Northern Ireland, of course, 56% of whom voted to remain within the single market, and getting a Norway-style deal with Stormont getting a direct say on EU law. Does he therefore not think there's some irony for Scotland, which voted 62% to remain within the single market, that we get absolutely zero?
Well, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I think the honourable gentleman doesn't recognise the unique and specific circumstances of Northern Ireland and the fact that it shares a land border with the EU, the fact that we want to avoid a hard border between Northern Ireland and the Republic, and the democratic deficit that existed with regard to the application of EU law. The Stormont break eliminates that democratic deficit and restores sovereignty to Northern Ireland, and no matter what other political differences he and I might have, I hope that he can recognise that it is an enormous step forward.
Dean Russell.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. Can I share comments with colleagues, share thoughts with DCI Coldwell and his family? I think one of the key parts of this deal is the fact that there's lots of detail to it. It's a very complex deal. And can I share that I feel very hopeful and confident that time is being given to review the deal, that it's not being rushed. And may I pay tribute to the Prime Minister and his colleagues for making sure that there's space to do that for all in this House.
I thank my honourable friend. He's right. There is a lot in here, and that's because it is a comprehensive agreement that addresses a wide range of issues that were raised with me and my colleagues about the implementation of the protocol, and that's why we have something that is as substantive as it is. It's because of the hard work of my colleagues, the engagement of the European Union, and it's why I can say with conviction that it does address the issues that were raised. It does secure Northern Ireland's place in the Union and safeguard sovereignty, and as people engage with the detail of it, I hope that they come to the same conclusion.
Geraint Davis.
Yes, I very much welcome the statement today, in particular the sentence, and we will take further steps to avoid regulatory divergence in the future. Can we take this to mean that in the EU law revocation bill, we'll maximise the reassimilation of EU law, minimise the divergence, and therefore take full advantage of the economic opportunities for Northern Ireland for growth and indeed for the UK for growth moving forward?
No, actually, there are opportunities to do things differently across the UK to drive growth and prosperity, whether that's in life sciences, financial services, fintech and other areas, and we will fully take advantage across the UK of those opportunities. What that refers to, though, very specifically is the work of the Office for the Internal Market, which we have strengthened as a result of this agreement and provided some extra detail about what we do in the command paper. I think that's the right thing to do, and I think it will be warmly welcomed in Northern Ireland, particularly in the business community.
Saqib Barton.
Mr Speaker, I commend the Prime Minister for what he has achieved today. And in 2016, if someone had said while we were campaigning to leave the EU that this is what we would have had, we would have jumped at it. Am I right in understanding that what makes this truly a landmark agreement is that part of it, well, it is based under international law, under the Vienna Convention on Law of Treaties, something that many would have said would not have been achievable?
My honourable friend is absolutely right, and I think he's right to take us all back some years and to have said, what would we have said if this was available at that moment of time? I think that is a sensible way to look at this and put it in context, what we have achieved. But he's also right, and I pay tribute to the honourable gentleman from Stone, who's no longer in his seat, about the Vienna Convention. It's something that he advised and spoke to me about. I'm pleased that we could secure it, and it does have significance of the like that he described.
Dr Neil Hudson.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. I very much welcome the Windsor Framework, and can I congratulate the Prime Minister and his team for securing this historic agreement. Can my right honourable friend confirm that the very sensible and pragmatic veterinary and sanitary and phytosanitary arrangements within the framework will protect both the UK's and the island of Ireland's biosecurity? And can the Prime Minister reaffirm that the long-term availability of medicines in Northern Ireland will very much ultimately include veterinary medicines?
Lots in there, Mr Deputy Speaker, but he's right. There have been long-standing arrangements in place to protect biosecurity on the island of Ireland, and indeed the respect that the UK has had for the single epidemiological zone on that island. We will continue to respect all of those things. Nothing in this framework changes that. That's something that everyone has agreed with in the past. No one has objected to it, and it's right that we continue to move forward with those procedures.
Greg Smith.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. From the headlines of the Windsor Framework, it's clear that a great deal of progress has been made, and I commend my right honourable friend for that. And I look forward to getting stuck in to scrutinising the detail. But as I get on with that exercise, seeking to answer the question, does this framework fully restore Northern Ireland as a full and equal part of our United Kingdom? Can the Prime Minister help me understand how it is under the Stormont break, unprecedented as that mechanism is, that EU law is still presumed to take primacy with an option to opt out of it, as opposed to UK law being the primary law with an option, should it be right for Northern Ireland, to opt into EU law?
I think one honourable friend should recognise that what we're talking about is less than 3% of EU law. That law applies with the consent of the people of Northern Ireland, and it's there because it avoids a hard border on the island of Ireland, something that I think everyone agrees with, but also preserves access to the EU single market for Northern Ireland businesses, something, as we've heard from colleagues and those businesses, they also value. But the important point is consent, and that's why the Stormont break is so important. It ensures that it is the institution and the people of Northern Ireland that get to decide whether they think that those laws are appropriate from them, and because of the powerful safeguard that it is, it ensures that the UK has, if needed, a veto over those laws that cause concern, and that's why the Windsor Framework represents such a decisive breakthrough.
Aaron Bell.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. Mr Deputy Speaker, last June I was pleased to speak in favour of and indeed vote for the Northern Ireland Protocol Bill because I believe it was a necessary piece of legislation that served as a fallback to address the legitimate concerns of the unionist community, but also to strengthen our hands in negotiations. But given the result the Prime Minister has got, and I congratulate him heartily on it, we've got things we didn't think were possible. Does he agree that it is not only no longer necessary, but also no longer has any basis in law?
My honourable friend is absolutely right. He will have seen the note that we published from the Attorney General, whilst it did have a sound legal basis when it was introduced, and he's right about the impact that it had and the necessity of having it. We have achieved what we needed with the Windsor Framework, a legally sound, durable agreement that means everyone can plan with certainty, that brings benefits far quicker, indeed almost immediately, removes all the EU legal cases that were against us, and as he said, we have no legal basis proceeding with the protocol bill now that we have this new agreement, and that's why it's the right way forward.
And the ever-patient Anthony Magna.
After all that, Mr Deputy Speaker, I'm not sure what I can ask that will be new, but can I start by congratulating the quartet of negotiators that we have sitting on the front bench. After the last 2 and a bit hours, we have seen the detail and knowledge that the Prime Minister has on this subject and the care that he has taken. And I hope that this will be the opportunity, Mr Deputy Speaker, to unlock the opportunities through our specialised trade committees to do better for fishing and aquaculture, to see Horizon and Euratom. But can I just specifically ask him, on trade deals and free trade agreements, can he assure me and all members of the International Trade Select Committee that nothing will impact our ability to sign future free trade agreements and that it will benefit Northern Ireland to the same extent?
Well, it's an excellent note to end on, Mr Deputy Speaker. My honourable friend is absolutely right, and an enormous part of the Windsor Framework is ensuring that in every aspect Northern Ireland is part of our precious United Kingdom. That's what this framework achieves. It ensures that there is free flow of goods across the United Kingdom internal market. It does protect Northern Ireland's place in our union, ensuring that people and businesses can enjoy the same benefits in Northern Ireland as they do elsewhere, including trade deals. And crucially and critically, it restores sovereignty. It safeguards sovereignty for the people of Northern Ireland. It eliminates the democratic deficit. That is why I passionately believe it is the right thing for the people of Northern Ireland. And I hope that as people engage with the detail, they will see that, and it provides a basis on which we can all collectively move forward and build a brighter future for Northern Ireland.
Can I thank the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition for their presence over 2.5 hours of this statement, and upon which I think we can probably, whatever our views, feel has been a historic occasion. Thank you.
I beg to move that this House to now adjourn.
The question is that this House do now adjourn. James Daly.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr Deputy Speaker. And before I begin my remarks, I must declare, Mr Deputy Speaker, that I am the joint chair, the proud joint chair of the all-party parliamentary group for boxing. And I believe that amateur boxing is a force for social good in this country, and that is the point and purpose of this debate. And I intend to highlight not only the fabulous work that's going on with amateur boxing clubs throughout the country, but the real social value that is being added by them. And after the historic events we have just been talking about, it is somewhat appropriate, I think, that my journey into boxing, Mr Deputy Speaker, began on a cold, even though I wasn't born at the time, a cold night on the 1st of March 1948, when at the King's Hall in Belfast, my great-uncle, Gerald Paddy Slavin, became the heavyweight champion of Ireland. And he held that title for a number of years. He was number 8 in Europe. And that was something that inspired my late dad, Barry. Boxing was his main preoccupation, his main interest, his main passion outside of his family and his children. And it's for him that I stand here today. So if I could just put this issue into a national context, and I think it is right to acknowledge the great work of England Boxing. And England Boxing, who've helped me in the preparation of my debate today, is, for those who don't know, the national governing body for amateur boxing within England, and is one of the only sporting governing bodies with its sole focus outside and separate from the professional and unlicensed elements. England Boxing has a new strategy in place through to 2027 and has gone through rapid change. But with the support of Sport England and others, it now has the opportunity to grow and build in both competitive and community delivery. With a membership of over 1,000 clubs, 25,000 competitive boxers, coaches and officials, and around 150,000 recreational boxers using clubs each week, alongside being successful in delivering medals at international championships, the sport has a significant record in delivering community programmes and activity in inner cities and local communities. So we are talking about boxing and social mobility. Boxing promotes social mobility and inclusion, positive mental health and well-being, and economic growth, and these are all key objectives as the country emerges from the pandemic and tackles the current cost of living crisis, and as the government develops its new strategy for sport, expected later this year, I'm sure, from the excellent Minister. Of course.
Mr Deputy, can I commend the Honourable Gentleman for Bury North and bringing this forward? Like the Honourable Gentleman, he's a very, very active boxing club. We have a very active one in my town of Newton Ards, and it does a number of things. In my own constituency, the boxing club has been helping young people to train effectively and learn to channel their energy in an appropriate and helpful manner. And does the Honourable Gentleman further agree that clubs need to be funded to survive in these days when outgoings far outstrip financial incomings, and the benefit to health deserves investment?
Can I thank the Honourable Gentleman very much for that point, which is absolutely salient to what I'm going to discuss. Funding is crucial to the work that boxing clubs throughout our United Kingdom, through every single part of it, and the work that they do in their communities. These are clubs that are run by volunteers. They need the financial support to be able to do the work, and some of that I'm going to touch on. And if the Honourable Gentleman had more time, I'm sure he'd talk about the detailed work that club is doing in changing individual lives. And there is not many sporting organisations, professional or amateur, that can do what amateur boxing clubs do. So I thank him very much for his intervention. Of course.
I omitted to say what I wish to say and add in. Across Northern Ireland, boxing has also done other things. It has united the two communities together. My honourable friend and colleague is one of those examples as well. And it's an interest in Northern Ireland that the two things we excel in is boxing and shooting.
I thank him very much for those comments. Grassroots and community boxing clubs offer so much more than just a space to train, and are a vital social mobility and inclusion promoter and generator. Boxing clubs not only provide pastoral and educational support to young people and adults in need, but also help to promote social mobility, as I've discussed, inclusion, tackle criminal activity and antisocial behaviour, and deliver improvements in physical and mental well-being. Research published in 2020 by the Sport Industry Research Centre at Sheffield Hallam demonstrates that grassroots and community boxing clubs are well placed to support such ambitions, a crucial point. As compared to other sports, they can reach deep into diverse communities and to appeal to men and women, young people and adults. Of course, yes.
Thank you for giving way, and in doing so, having been one of those people who in a previous life got involved in boxing, and not actually in the ring, so I must say I thoroughly enjoyed it. But you know, in my community, I have found those that have been involved in young people getting into boxing, it's steering them away and keeping them away from drugs and even alcohol. And many of them, actually, that discipline carries right through until they're adults, and it's fantastic to see what it can achieve.
Can I thank the honourable gentleman for that intervention? And all the evidence points to that. There is evidence in every town in this country which points to exactly that point, and this is why it's such an important issue. Boxing and social mobility are two things which perhaps wouldn't normally be part of a debate or go together. But what we are seeing here with real evidence, empirical evidence, is the value added and how you change people's lives. Every single conversation we should have in this place is about how individual policies and groups can change individual lives. It's very difficult to think of anything that will change the lives of millions of people in one go. Boxing is doing it for thousands of people throughout this country, and I thank him for that. The sport itself finds itself in a unique position when compared to others, with 40% of clubs and members located in the top 20 most deprived parts of the country and 75% in the top 50 most deprived areas. Amateur boxing clubs are quite literally in the heart of the least physically active communities in England. Sport England's Active Life survey found that people from lower socio-economic groups are the most likely to be inactive, 33%. And again, this is not about making comments regarding how people live their lives. It's just simply identifying the place of amateur boxing clubs where they can make the biggest difference. And with an overwhelming majority of LSEG communities being located in the most deprived parts of the country, it becomes evident just how vital English boxing clubs really are to supporting young people, inclusion and social mobility. Of course, yes.
Call him that for giving way, and I congratulate him on this debate. And just on the point about inclusion and social mobility, he may be interested to know that in Warwick and Leamington we had the Turpin brothers, he may have heard of, the famous Turpin brothers. And of course it was Dick Turpin who broke what was then called the colour bar, and his brother Randolph, who won the first world title for a black boxer. But those brothers broke through, and as a result of that, it was Asian and black sports people who now perform at national colours for our country as a result of their work.
Well, can I just say what a wonderful thing to say that is? I mean, I don't know, we probably share this, and my dad told me all about Randolph Turpin. We could have conversations about Don Cockle, about Brownland, about lots of different boxers. But what he's just pointed out is a wonderful story of the ultimate tale of social mobility, of somebody through their passion, determination, both brothers are, I would recommend anybody to read about them because their achievements are immense, and I thank him for that intervention. It is due to the B2 2022 Legacy Fund that English boxing has been able to recruit a cohort of community apprentices from these very same communities, providing them with employment, education and the opportunity to leave a legacy of their own through projects and events, and they are actively delivering to support others in the local area as well. The work they are doing is also having a lasting impact on clubs by enabling them to recruit volunteers, deliver engagement events, and enable them to provide social mobility to support those in the greatest needs. Now, it's only right, we've heard some of the wonderful examples here, that we point to some examples, and I must take this opportunity, Mr Deputy Speaker, to point to examples in my own constituency, because that would only be right. And the ultimate example of this, in my area, this man is called legendary, and he truly is in terms of what he's achieved and the impact he's had on lives. Bury Amateur Boxing Club was set up in 1936 by a man called Pop Jelly. His son Mick, who has been given the freedom of the borough of the Metropolitan Borough of Bury, was handed the reins 55 years ago, actually longer than that, it's about 60 years ago. So Mick Jelly is a man who has been at the centre of sporting activity in the town of Bury for 60 years. He has worked and supported and found ways to help people who have come to him in the most disadvantaged and challenging circumstances, and he's a true hero, and more heroes like Mr Jelly need to be identified and celebrated in this place. And I just, if you'll indulge me for a second, Mr Deputy Speaker, I just wanted to make his the ultimate example and the ultimate witness to what boxing can do. And he said, this was a comment from him in 2017, talking about his experiences. The satisfaction does not just come from watching the boys win. It is about helping them grow as people. I've seen lads become men, grow in confidence and find their place in the world. Some have come to me as school dropouts and gone on to become millionaire businessmen. These are stories that are reported throughout the country. Now, that Bury Amateur Boxing Club has now merged with Bury Boxing Club. And Bury Defence Academy. And since that partnership has commenced, the sport in my area and the boxing club has grown. Bury Defence Academy offers 7 combat sports, 400 weekly service users are using the facility, and is a registered charity. The sport of boxing, as I say, has grown sharply in Bury. At least 100 more people are involved in boxing as a result of this partnership. It's opened up boxing to all abilities, levels, boys, girls and women. And the BDA receives funding via violence reduction units. This is a boxing club being funded to address violence reduction, which is Home Office funding, and the Ministry of Justice Youth Sport Fund. And these funds are being used to combine sport with mentoring, volunteering, training opportunities, anti-gang speeches, and various other things.
My honourable friend give way?
Of course.
Just on that point, obviously in Watford we've got Anthony Joshua. I haven't been fortunate to meet him, but I do know he has an incredible level of work that goes into helping the community with regards to charity work and so on. And there was a comment that was made to me when I was visiting NRG gym recently from one of the people who works there with MMA fighting. And he made the point, which is that when young people learn that they can make money from fighting, they no longer want to fight for free on the streets. And it was a really powerful point about antisocial behaviour and so on. And so I just wonder if my honourable friend would agree with me that this is about tackling challenges in society, but also helping with mental health, but also giving people a career and an opportunity to have a ladder up.
Well, I couldn't agree more. And what my honourable friend is, and what he's proved to be during the however long, with 3 and a bit years now we've been here, is that if you're a passionate advocate for your area, if you're somebody who lives and breathes and wants to support positive outcomes for your local community, there are certain outlets to do it. The boxing club that you've been talking about has been achieving that, and he certainly as an MP is doing exactly the same thing, and I congratulate him for that. I just wanted to make 2 further comments, Mr Deputy Speaker, regarding Mick Jelly, because I think this gets to the heart of what we're talking about. And in 2022, Mick, in a newspaper article, said, "I've been running a club for 60 years. There are lots of lads who came to me and said, but for you, I'd be in Strangeways Hotel." And I think we know Strangeways Hotel is a prison. What we do is try to keep lads on the straight and narrow and teach them right from wrong. Some of them do go wrong, but then we try to put them back on the straight path. What a philosophy of any organisation to have. And that's 7 days a week, 365 days a year. The chair of Bury Defence Academy, Mr Deputy Speaker, is a man called Ifti Ahmed, another wonderful, wonderful human being. And he's also said, a lot of lads come here, it is a kind of refuge for them. It is a diversion that keeps them from a life of crime. We've got to think at the earliest possible stage, how do we give these guys a better life, better opportunities, and something positive to aspire to? A lot of the lads have got no money in their pocket and they struggle in employment, so they get involved in drugs and gangs. If you nurture them, help them and get them fulfilling their potential through something like combat sport, it's protecting them from everything else out there. And that is what this is about. If you fund these organisations, these people who are doing it for nothing at this moment in time, think what you can do with a philosophy such as that and a record of delivery. But there are many other clubs throughout the country. I have to mention one of them in particular. I'm born and bred in Huddersfield. My father, who I've mentioned, was born about 10 minutes away from Rawthorpe Amateur Boxing Club in Huddersfield. They've developed to become critical hubs in their local community by providing knife crime prevention workshops, mother and toddler classes, boxercise sessions for OAPs, and this is obviously along with the traditional boxing outlets that they offer. If we go to Vulcan Amateur Boxing Club in Hull, they sought to become a food bank to feed their members in greatest need during lockdown, with thanks to funding from the Maverick Stars Trust. For many young people, the boxing club is a sanctuary from the problems they face elsewhere. It is a hub of support that instills life lessons of discipline, respect and teamwork. And again, I make no apologies for repeating these things. They are so important, the work that is happening. Some 63% of amateur boxing clubs in England are actively delivering community projects to try and use the sport as a hook for greater social mobility. Clubs like West Kingsdown Amateur Boxing Club in Kent, who for the past year have been delivering sessions in partnership with Parkinson's UK to help get elderly people in the area living with the disease more active, to slow the progression of the disease with thanks to funding from Sport England. That's a boxing club. If that was the NHS delivering that, we'd be overjoyed, we'd be singing their praise. That's a boxing club doing that.
Madam Frank, if just on that point, as you mentioned the NHS, I just wanted to actually echo thanks. During lockdown, a friend of mine, Anito Donaire, who's also known as a Flash, a professional boxer, he's won titles in many different weights. He actually recorded a video for me to send to nurses and doctors and staff at Watford General Hospital, who were Filipino, to thank them for the work they were doing. And I think what it shows is the power of boxing, the power of sport, and the power of the people within that sport to go across borders and thank people right at home where they might be not living where they would originally been brought up.
I completely agree with that point, and just to develop that point, that the target audience of these projects are very often those who are underrepresented in society, such as those targeting women and girls, which is 69% of club projects, LSEG and crime prevention 67%, disability and inclusion 41%. With thanks to funding from Sport England, and I'm sure my honourable friend the Minister will mention Sport England, because England Boxing are incredibly grateful for the funding that they have received, but they, through £500,000 provided by the Tackling Inequalities Fund and Together Fund, English Boxing has been able to support clubs with, over the last 2 years, to deliver projects such as these, as well as ethnically diverse communities, which make up 22%, I repeat that, 22% of England Boxing's members. So £500,000 over 2 years, great, and I celebrate and thank Sport England for that funding. But we are just highlighting here that if there were the opportunity for further funding, what work could be done. England Boxing and the clubs throughout the country are just waiting to have that potential to be released, to be able to do the work they want to do in the community. And of course, yes.
I thank you for being very, very generous, and the funding is really important. I have a very successful gym in my constituency, one that the Turpins essentially got started. And Ed Cleary, who's running it, but he really is working across the community. And we have two terrific young girls, aged 13 and 12, who did phenomenally well in the Europeans, Jaya Kalsi and Serena Marley, and another boxer, Lewis Williams, who won the gold in the Commonwealth heavyweight. But the important thing is it's run by volunteers. It's a not-for-profit. But they are dependent. They do fantastic work across the community, but they do need support from the likes of Sport England, and I hope they'll get that.
Well, I thank the Honourable Gentleman for that intervention, and I sincerely hope that they do. We're in a world where clearly to stand on any subject and demand unlimited resources is not reasonable. But I think we were always looking for those projects that have got a record of delivery. And I think one of the elixirs of politics is the partnership between public sector funding and voluntary organisations or community organisations, because that anchor in the community is something that sometimes the state does not have, and boxing clubs deliver that. And I think he makes an excellent point. And I just very briefly, Mr Deputy Speaker, comment on resources. And it's just reiterating the point that my honourable friend has made. With over 95% of all clubs being run exclusively by just 2 or 3 dedicated volunteers, the time, skill and knowledge required to capitalise on the unique and trusted position these clubs have to support disadvantaged people is often missed. Exactly the point that has just been made. There is rarely the time left for voluntary coaches to set up and deliver a new project after opening the club on average of 3 evenings a week, then sacrificing weekends and holidays to transport and coach boxers at competitions and events before returning to maintain the gym, order new equipment or deal with club administration, usually on their own and free of charge. It's work throughout the year. This is all taking place in buildings which are, and I think we would all agree on this, substandard facilities, with club volunteers and members alike simply making do as best they can to maintain their gyms. And in many areas, they simply cannot find appropriate places for the gyms to have a gym in the first place. 66% of clubs have written a rental or hire agreement in place. Fewer than half of them have 5 years or more left on the agreement, meaning that nearly 700 amateur boxing clubs have either no security of tenure or less than 5 years before they potentially find themselves without a home. So it's about sustainability, and Sport England, English boxing, club officers throughout the country are looking to work proactively with government, with local councils, with local mayoralties to find ways and solutions to make sure that the clubs have a sustainable future. In conclusion, Mr Deputy Speaker, I just bring I would welcome a comment from the Minister in respect of one other issue, and it's a very serious issue because quite uniquely in this country, we've seen well, this is not the unique point, we've seen an explosion really in white-collar boxing and that taking place, but England boxing and the government does not yet have the authority or legislation respectively in place that other nations have to prevent event organisers from operating outside of the rules and guidelines set by national governing bodies of amateur boxing. So can I ask, does the Department of Culture, Media and Sport plan to tackle the issue of white-collar unlicensed boxing, given that they are not accountable to EB or the national governing body or any specific legislation? In terms of the other points I would raise, it is about funding, it is about facilities, and I know because I do have a tendency to want to say when we have good people answering questions, the Minister is a good man, and I know that he is a man who will support such projects in his area and throughout the country. And if there is a way to have a meeting to develop a relationship between government and through English boxing, I know that he will be open to that and to find ways to support the great work that is being done. And to finish, community boxing clubs should be front and centre, I believe, of the government's new sports strategy and levelling up policy agenda. They are a vital social mobility generator and play a unique role in supporting mobility, inclusion and regeneration in constituencies throughout the country. English boxing and many others are calling on the government to fully harness the power of grassroots and community boxing clubs in its new sports strategy. And just to finish, and when we look at amateur sport throughout this country, whether it's sport for younger people, for older people, the position of boxing clubs are unique. One can hardly go. I've seen and worked with some of the greatest amateur clubs and people involved in sport, in football, cricket and all sorts of other sports. But the work that is being done by these clubs is overlooked, it's ignored, and it is a wonderful thing to be able to stand here and to celebrate every club, amateur boxing club in the country, everybody who gives their time, everyone who is working to improve the lives of just one person or 10 or 20. And I pay tribute to every single person and the work of English boxing in trying to keep everyone safe whilst all this good work is happening. Thank you very much, Mr Deputy Speaker.
Minister, Stuart Andrew.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker, and I'm pleased to respond to this debate, and I'm extremely grateful to my honourable friend, the member for Bury North, for securing it. And given his family's heritage in boxing and the honourable gentleman's experience of boxing, I'm rather anxious to get the response right to this debate today, because the contributions that have been made by members across the chamber this evening show the importance that the House places on support for grassroots sport and in particular boxing clubs. And honourable members have quite rightly mentioned the many volunteers and coaches that give up a tremendous amount of time, and frankly much of our sporting facilities would just not exist if it were not for the people giving up of their time and sometimes their own money in support of the work that they do. And I was interested to hear about the experiences of Mr Jelly, but also I was pleased very recently to visit a boxing club in Bradford and see for myself the tremendous work that was going on there and the work that they were doing, particularly with people perhaps sometimes felt they were overlooked in the opportunities, and I hope to talk more about that shortly. I think all members will agree with me that these clubs provide people wherever they may be in the country with fantastic opportunities to lead healthy lives, unlock their potential, as well as make new friends in life. This government is committed to ensuring that everyone, no matter what their background, has the opportunity to participate in sport. Since 2019, Sport England has invested more than £12 million into boxing to make this possible, including £2.3 million worth of support to boxing clubs during the COVID pandemic. Like all sports, boxing has the unique ability to unite communities and connect people who otherwise would never have crossed their paths. And the examples that we heard from colleagues from Northern Ireland, I think, particularly articulated that well. Big fight nights, such as December's Tyson Fury versus Derek Chisora or last October's Savannah Marshall versus Clarissa Shields, create exciting moments of sporting theatre. But beyond the drama at the elite level, sport has the ability to unlock potential by giving young people essential leadership and resilient skills. And throughout this debate this evening, we've talked about the importance and contribution that they make to social mobility. And social mobility, being one of the many areas in my portfolio, is one that I'm particularly keen on, because unlocking people's potential early on in life is a great thing for us to be able to do, I believe, and certainly make sure that we get the very best out of young people for their lives ahead. And research commissioned by Sport England shows that for every £1 that is invested in community sport, there is a return of £4 of wider social and economic value. And this is why, as a government, we are committed to ensuring everyone across the country has access to high-quality provision. Last year's Active Lives survey shows that between mid-November 2020 and mid-November 21, just over 6 in 10 adults, 28 million, achieved 150 minutes or more activity a week, with those from the lower socio-economic groups and deprived areas more likely to be less active. We know that opportunities to participate in sport are not equal across the country, and this is why we are working with Sport England to provide direct support to the organisations and communities in areas that need it the most. Over the past 12 months, 19.2% of Sport England's local level investment has been for projects in IMD1 areas. And we recognise that we need to maintain progress in this area, and this year, as my honourable friend alluded to, we will be publishing a new sports strategy that will set out how we will continue to support people, no matter who they are or where they are from, to enjoy the benefits of participating in sport. And for me personally, dealing with issues around communities, bringing inclusion and bringing communities together, and an emphasis on access for sport for women and girls will feature heavily in that sports strategy. This will also concentrate on addressing current disparities in participation, supporting children and young people, and ensuring everyone has the facilities they need in order to be active. Helping ensure those from hard-to-reach communities get the opportunity to play sport is something that matters to me personally, and I look forward to working with members right across this House to make sure that there is progress in this area, and I see grassroots sport as being key to achieving many of those ambitions. Sport, and in particular sport like boxing, can also play an important role in tackling youth violence, and can have a transformative impact in the prevention and early intervention work with children at risk of offending behaviour. During the summer, I spent a few weeks as the Prisons Minister, but I was particularly struck on a visit to a Young Offenders Institute, speaking to two individuals who sadly did not have the opportunities that perhaps we are alluding to here, and seeing that their lives now are going to be spent primarily in the criminal justice system. These were two particularly articulate young people, and it struck me that had they been given an alternative path to go down, it might be that we would have two individuals contributing to our society and saving our public purse a great deal of money. And that is why last November the Ministry of Justice announced a £5 million sport fund to deliver sport for crime prevention programmes. This funding will deliver grants to around 200 local projects which deliver targeted support for children considered to be at risk of entering the justice system due to identified need or additional vulnerabilities. The projects funded through the programme will build upon some of the fantastic programmes that are already being run by community boxing clubs right up and down the country, and I thank them for that. Schemes such as the Clink to Club programme, which provides transitional support and guidance on the benefits of boxing and mental well-being for inmates from Brixton to Bronzefield prisons before they are reintegrated to their local communities and club. And now I know a number of members have also approached me about the impact of energy bills on clubs, and my honourable friend was right to mention some of the facilities that they are operating out of. And I recognise that this is a challenging area for those clubs, and that's why we are working very closely with the sector to support them through the current challenges, and with boxing clubs eligible for support under things like the Energy Bill Relief Scheme and its successor programme. Now, my honourable friend referred to white-collar boxing. The safety, well-being and welfare of everyone taking part in sport is always absolutely paramount. Whilst there are always risks associated with participating in contact sport, it is important that robust measures are in place to reduce the risk of major injuries and health issues, and we urge all boxing event organisers to work with the sports governing bodies to ensure that robust competition standards are in place to protect the safety of those who are taking part. But I particularly understand the issues that he was talking about and his request for us to discuss this further in a meeting, which I'd be more than happy to oblige with. So in conclusion, Mr Deputy Speaker, that sport has the real power to change lives. Yes, of course.
I thank the Minister for his comments. Could I draw attention particularly to the Trin Centre in Cleethorpes and their boxing academy overseen by Andy Cox and an excellent team of volunteers. But returning to the issue of sustainable funding for these organisations, could the Minister give an assurance that he will do all he can to ensure that it's actually much easier to ensure continuity of funding once an initial grant has been established. These organisations spend so much time having to complete forms and it's a complicated process. If he could do anything to streamline that process, it would be very welcome.
Minister.
Well, given before I was elected to this House, I used to work in the charity sector. I know how complex many of those forms are and how long it takes to fill them out. So it is an area that I'd be keen to look at. I have regular meetings, of course, with bodies like Sport England, so I'll be sure to arrange to discuss that at my next meeting with them. As I say, you know, sport has the power to change lives, and that has been evidenced particularly well by colleagues across the House this evening, and not just through the benefits it can have on just one individual's health, but also the role that local clubs can play in fostering relationships and breaking down barriers in communities. And that is why this government is committed to ensuring that everyone has the opportunity to benefit from playing sport and physical activity, and we will continue to work to address the disparities in opportunity both through Sport England funding and our upcoming sport strategy, recognising the important role that they play in many of our communities. And finally, I would just say, I also want to recognise the huge contribution that many of these clubs provide in the community activity that my honourable friend alluded to. We know during the pandemic, many sporting clubs up and down the country really stood up and helped the communities in which they are based. This is a huge contribution and shows that they are more than just sporting facilities and sporting clubs. They are intrinsically in the heart of the communities in which they serve, and for that I want to give them my thanks, and I thank all honourable members for their time in this important debate this evening.
Question is that this House still stand adjourned. As many of that opinion say aye. Contrary, no. The ayes have it. Order, order.
Commons sound. House of 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 Commons sound.